it's quite shocking, to be honest. I mean, President Trump, leading up to the U.S. going in and capturing Maduro in Venezuela was all about, this is national security interests for the United States. This is about, protecting the U.S. This is, part of his America First strategy, even though there's still some questions there on how much is this really American First. But even for Greenland, he was making the same argument that the U.S., needed this for national security. But to see this letter and for it to be about him not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, it definitely brings questions on, okay, how much about national security is this, or how much is this just about you trying to find a way to get the Nobel Peace Prize or express your frustration for not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize? So it's definitely quite interesting that he has sort of taken this turn in the midst of everything that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can well imagine this is going to dominate conversation at Davos, and the timing ahead of Davos, with the world's sort of most powerful, influential people, many of whom will be in front of microphones this week, is fascinating. So tell us, Scarlett, I mean, Trump himself going to Davos, what's he hoping to achieve? Yeah, well, I mean, this is the first major gathering among the global elite, from business leaders to other country heads, and since Venezuela, and I guess the first major event of the new year, technically. But the president leading up to it has been talking about affordability, and he seems to want, it seems what we've gathered so far is during his major address, he's going to focus on housing and affordability. And back in the U.S., this is a midterm year, and for his base, for Republican voters, there is some frustration, some anxiety on his policies. I mean, from tariffs to just sort of everything that he's done in his first year in office, there's a lot of questions on how are his policies translating to voters as prices in the U.S. are just skyrocketing, and affordability has definitely become, a theme that Republicans, the Trump administration, are trying to navigate to secure those votes. But, I mean, it is quite interesting that he's going to lay out all of these housing policies at Davos, which is a conference for, pretty wealthy people. So it does also raise into question how in touch is the administration in terms of connecting with voters, like in middle of America, for example, who are, some might not even know what Davos is. And I think that's sort of what the administration is having to navigate right now, is how they're messaging affordability to American voters right now. But I mean, we'll see what he says, but it seems like it's going to be a lot on housing and affordability policies.
The Cows, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Monday, February 9, 2027. So I have been told. I'm not a fan of the early broadcasts. When I say early, meaning substantially earlier than what our normal broadcast time is. But we make adjustments, trying to learn as much as possible all the time. And the system of white supremacy is a global enterprise, so have to make adjustments sometimes to speak with people who are in different parts of the planet due to the massive time differences, and trying to juggle them as best we can. So on early, and even in context, I said I was going to ask about it, so this is my way of reminding myself. We were just here, let me see, approximately 15 hours ago, so pretty quick turnaround. Here broadcasting for the Super Bowl. I said then, hey, even though the home team triumphed, get ready for our parade. Gus T was not out rolling around in the street, acting a fool, celebrating the Seahawks triumph. No way. I was prepping, told you yesterday, prepping for our broadcast today. President Trump, when he is not talking about President Obama and his gorilla wife, former First Lady Michelle Obama, when he's not invested in all of that, he was talking about got to get these ICE people round here, round up these folks that's not supposed to be here, and they're going to come up off of Greenland. We're going to get that one way or another. We're going to get that Greenland property. He had been talking about that the whole time. And a lot of the Scandinavian and other European countries said, whoa, what is going on here? Sovereignty. You don't talk about coming over here and taking property and all that. They had been talking about this quite a bit. That was one component in addition to System of White Supremacy. For Norway and a lot of these Nordic countries, President Trump had also been talking when he had been grousing and complaining, why do we need ICE? Because we got all this trash from Somalia. Why do we got all these dark people, these Somalis coming over here? Matter of fact, he said they were stealing. Got that white child on YouTube, or I guess he wasn't a child, white man on YouTube, made that video. He was pretty young though, and said, we got these Somalis over here in Minnesota, and they're stealing all of the daycare funds. Fraud. We need to investigate, and we need to boot these dark people out of here. That's what he had been talking about prior to all of everything, I guess, with the monkeys and lots of distractions for Black History Month. But there were lots of connections for what I was doing yesterday, as opposed to celebrating with the Super Bowl, prepping for our broadcast today and trying to grasp what is happening in the region of Norway related to racism, white supremacy. They certainly have had a lot to say about the proposed theft of Greenland and racism. They've been having a lot of the exact same conversations we've been having here, sometimes about the exact same groups of people. Why do we have all these Somali folks over here messing everything up? And why do we have all these dark people here, period, messing everything up? For folks who are not informed, the region of the world known as Norway, they have a population that's a little bit under 6 million, unless I have been misinformed. Super homogenous, as they say, this region approximately 85%, and it likely is higher than that. But at minimum, about 85% of the people in Norway are classified as white. And I suspect it was probably higher than that, maybe 20, 25 years ago. But what they say, browning has been happening, and they got more dark people coming in, so it's been dropping a little bit. And folks like Anders Breivick have been very angry about all of these dark people. Because the same thing President Trump and many others have been talking about here and all throughout the known universe, apparently. Any hoodles, even some of that anti-white discrimination talk happening. Anyway, I was recently, as I encourage, I guess I can say one more time, reading is more important than watching television. I generally make an effort, I generally tell non-white people, victims of racism, you should get one nonfiction book per calendar year. Read it, especially since they say, hey, many people on the planet don't even read one book per year. You should get at least one nonfiction book per year and read. So generally, I'll go through and see what are some of the newer books that have been published, what are people writing, saying about racism, just so that I can see new research, new ways that people are talking about this problem. Always important to try to learn. Hopefully we can get this problem solved sooner than later. One of the books that I located on one of my more recent searches, the title, make sure I get the full load up here. Oh, that's why I don't like, no fan of the early morning broadcast. Lots of work here, but full title for the text, Too Black to Be Here, Exploring Racism in Norway Through 4 Critical Cases. Of course, Anders Breivick had to be one of those 4, of course. But fascinating read, really kind of confirms, if you had any doubts about it being a global system of white supremacy racism, text like this, confirmation, nowhere to run. We are going to have to face this problem. Our guest for today's broadcast, in addition to writing the aforementioned Too Black to Be Here, he is a professor of pedagogy, specializing in critical pedagogy, multicultural education at the University of South-Eastern Norway. He's written a number of different reports. Even this is not his first book, writing and talking about racism in Norway, his experiences in this part of the world, what he's seen with the influx of non-white people, and being there when the 2011 white terrorist Anders Breivick killed close to 80 people. I even forget that attack started with a bombing. We spent so much time talking about acts of white terrorism and bombings like Timothy McVeigh and Eric Rudolph and Reb and Dill at Columbine, which was a failed bombing. Ted Kaczynski, it's a long list, it just goes on and on and on. But white people in the Oppenheimer, how many do you want to put on the list? But I tend to forget that, oh yeah, Anders Breivik, he did gun down a lot of children, but that did start with a bombing. Anyway, we will chat it up about the brand new book, and maybe even see if we can get in a word about current observations. What are white people over there saying about Greenland and President Trump? Do they think he is really going to try and steal their property and all the rest of it? Like, fascinating times on the plantation. Our guest joining us live from Norway, Professor Paul Thomas. Professor Thomas, are you with us? Let's see here. Should be. Looks like mic should be open. Are you with us, Professor Thomas? Can you hear us? Oh, try it again. Let's see. Looks like your mic is open. I don't know if you hit your mute button, or let's see. Not hearing you. If you're talking, we're not hearing you. Try again. Let's see. Not hearing you. Can see you on the switchboard. It looks like your microphone is open. Let me try it again to make sure it's not me. Let's see. Not hearing you, Professor Thomas. I'm not sure if you accidentally hit your mute button on your device, if you're on your mobile or your computer, kind of make sure. I've had that happen to me sometimes where you accidentally brush up against it, so you can maybe double check that. I don't know if you're on a headset or not. Maybe check if you're on a headset to make sure you have all your wires connected and what have you, and are ready to roll. I guess if worst comes to worst, you could hang up and then dial back in and see if there's
okay.
There we go. I think we got you there.
Well, my apologies for the confusion here. But am I coming through, Gus?
Crystal clear now, sir. Thank you so much. Perfect. We got you.
Apologies for that. Well, firstly, I've been hearing you loud and clear. Thank you so much for the invitation, and the fact that people in the States were interested in this book, and surprised me in the sense that I actually haven't had much feedback, at least here in Norway, when it comes to the book. And so this is something I just appreciate so much, especially given the legacy that we Black people in this part of the world, have benefited from. And I'm just basically, saying thank you to what Black Americans have been through, hundreds of years, slavery, and I'm thinking of the legacy of Du Bois and Douglas and others. So we acknowledge that debt, and thank you for having me on the program.
Well, thank you. That's super gracious. Thank you. And just full disclosure, Professor Thomas had made similar, very gracious, very appreciative remarks in his email for the chance to talk about his brand new book about racism, white supremacy in Norway, as well as specifically gratitude for, I guess, black victims of racism in the U.S. specifically. He quotes quite a few of them in his book, some of them older, James Baldwin, Frederick, I mean, if you want to go way back, Frederick Douglass, and then some of the more newer black people who've tried to solve this problem, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Charles W. Mills, who's a guest on our program as well. So, it even jogged my memory. I have heard this when we've talked to black people in other parts of the world. Some of them have made similar comments, and just saying that Malcolm X had a big impact on their thinking, or Assata Shakur, or some other black person born in this part of the world, and what they did to try to address the problem of white supremacy had a big impact on their thinking. So hopefully we can get it together, figure things out, get this problem solved, and then we can move on to sharing other cool ideas other than how white people are terrorizing us. For listeners, this I'm sure might be their first time hearing about you and your book, Too Black to Be Here, and your other works. Anything that you would like to share about the work that you do over in Norway, sir?
Yes. It's, I think the case, it's fair to say that many black academics that I know, including myself, started off early in our careers focusing, on the subjects, the fields where we took our PhDs. I have a PhD in education pedagogy from King's College, London. And but what we've often been baffled about, I should say, is the fact that we've all over the course of the years just gravitated towards trying to understand this phenomenon of racism, because it doesn't matter which fields we specialize in. We noticed quite quickly that we were all facing the same challenges, which, basically, ultimately, we had to come together, because on our own, we realized, we saw colleagues basically collapsing under the weight of what they were going through, and they didn't have the nomenclature, the understanding of what this was. Because remember, racism in the context of Norway, Scandinavia is quite different than it is in the States, and so much more subtle, but nevertheless devastating ultimately. I'm thinking of Chester Pierce from Harvard University, who gave us the term microaggressions and others. And ultimately, with time, the accumulated experiences of microaggressions ultimately impact one's psychological well-being. And so I had these colleagues who were just succumbing under the full weight of these experiences. And so we said, we've got to get together. We've got to try to figure out what this is. And that's where, the earlier legacy I talked about, where, most of the theories, the research is stuff that is done in the USA, the UK. And so, because in Norway, there's something called Nordic exceptionalism, where there is this myth promoted that these countries are innocent when it comes to race, slavery and racism, etc. Nordic exceptionalism is a term that even white researchers use, and it's becoming more and more established that the problem is somehow the Scandinavian nations have promoted this notion that they are innocent. This is something that happened in Portugal, the USA, England. But now, with more and more research putting the spotlight on the history of these countries, things are coming to light. People are not aware that Norway was in a union with Denmark, where in the course of 200-300 years, they transported 130,000 slaves from West Africa, Ghana in particular, to islands in the Caribbean, St. John, St. Croix and others, where they basically used the slaves to grow sugarcane, etc. So who would imagine that Scandinavians were involved? 130,000 is a conservative estimate. One study said probably up to 600,000 were transported, which would put Norway and Denmark in third place, imagine, when it comes to transport of slaves. So there's this, we've uncovered that there could have been up to 100 slaves in Norway 400 years ago. So we've said blacks and Africans came to Norway not in the 70s, as people think, but 400 years ago. So that's what we are working on, and it's these things which led us to that there's clearly a gap in the literature. People are extremely poorly informed. I had to fight to start a course. Now I teach the 5-year, it's a master's teacher training course. To be a teacher in Norway, you've got to have this 5-year master's. And I'm glad to report that I've managed to start probably the first course where it's a course on racism in education. I've had students walk out at times because they just are not, used to this being taught in Scandinavia. We don't have this history. So it's basically what we're trying to do is gather together Black academics, and there are very few of us, and look at a topic which has really been buried in the mist of time. And Scandinavians are really, reluctant to grapple with this history. So that's where we are. Sorry for being long-winded there. Back to you.
Oh, much obliged, Dr. Thomas. Hey, I've never been to Norway, and I think that me and President Trump will probably both be very grumpy for the rest of our lives about not getting the Peace Prize. So we probably won't get to come over there and hang out. So I'm learning a lot about this region. I do think it's very important. I'm glad that you gave us that detailed history, because that, as you called it, this exceptionalism. Hey, we didn't participate in trafficking no niggers, and that's them no count Yanks over there, and those no count the British. They did all that. We no way. We didn't do all that up here. No way. That is a lie, and that is so important, because that sort of lie. Yeah, I might even say a concept that is used here. One of our listeners coined racial narrowing, where white people will try to make it seem that, oh, no, it's the racists are just this really tiny, small number of white people. It's not us, and it's not widespread. It's just a few people over in South Africa and a few people down in Mississippi. Those are the racists. This seems like a different, we didn't participate in slavery. It was just those people over there and over there. That didn't have nothing to do with us. We're the innocent white people. That is so important, and a widespread method of deception by white people. And then he talked about the impact on his colleagues at the university, where non-white colleagues, where they did not have the language to articulate what was happening to them in a system of white supremacy. So they were succumbing to all the abuse, mistreatment that is so important. We've heard the same sorts of tragedies, really, in this part of the world and others, and not having the language to articulate what is happening to you. Massive problem. Hopefully the cows, we can be a tiny part of correcting that. You talked about this courageous teacher training program to address racism in education, and you said, I don't know what you do. Maybe you go in, you give them the syllabus, and they look at it and say, what, we gonna read into? Oh no. You said they get up and they walk out of the class. What are the demographics of the people that you teach?
Most of the students that enroll, one has got to understand. I mean, they're white, and the thing is, as is the case, I would imagine, in other parts of the world. I'm familiar mostly with the UK scenario and Norway, but these are probably some of the most conservative fields and disciplines. In fact, the Norwegian curriculum states explicitly that teachers' jobs are to preserve the heritage of the country And by heritage, when we looked at it, because we had to critique that, we are talking about just the nice side of Norwegian history, to promote, the Christian side, and Norway being a world champion in terms of doing good, aid work and making peace in the world, etc. But much of the history of Norway, because part of that culture, that heritage, should include things like the legacy of slavery. Many people are not aware that the Jews in Norway were totally obliterated. Norwegian taxi drivers, Norwegian policemen went together door to door, apprehended Jews in 1940, and sent each and every one of them to Auschwitz. And they died the same day in one cargo ship that was actually meant for cattle. We have 5 national minorities. The curriculum says they're supposed to look at it and be familiar, but none of that is done in any detail, because the history of the 5 national minorities, and one of them happens to be an indigenous group called the Sami. In the old days, they would call them the Lapps, which is, the wrong term. It's like today we say the Romani people when it comes to the older Gypsy. But I've always been appalled at how poor the knowledge of, the past in terms of what happened with the national minorities. And so that includes Jews, that includes the indigenous Sami people. We have the Roma or Romani people. People are not aware that, even the students here are not aware. I'm not kind of, for us as educators, once we began to talk about this, we were shocked at the appalling levels of knowledge here in a country that normally is, people are highly educated and pride themselves in, being a small country that was overrun by the Nazis. They can't afford to be ignorant of, what's happening in the world in history. But when it comes to the history in terms of non-white people, it's almost scary for us, because very few of them know that in the Norwegian Constitution of 1814, it was explicitly stated Jews are not allowed to enter. In 1927, there was another law that said Romani people or Gypsies are not allowed to enter. And none of them fared well, including the indigenous. What happened to the indigenous people is quite, it bears parallels with what happened to the Native Americans, because, for instance, they were considered pagans who had to be Christianized. The children were taken from the parents. They were, they were told they cannot speak in their own mother tongue, the Sami language. And even when they converted to Christianity, they were told this is not good enough, because you're using your mother tongue in church services, and your mother tongue was used to communicate with demons in the past. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So it's been a brutal history where basically you could say from the 1700s all the way, again, my students are not aware, much of the world is not aware, that the Nordic countries practiced sterilization, believe it or not, of the Romani in particular, all the way to 1970. They were sterilizing minorities. So, the eugenics and this whole movement, Frances Dalton from the UK. So these are the things. Whenever I ask my students, how many of you have heard of Anne Frank? And hands go up. Interestingly, the same Anne Frank's diary has been banned in your Ron DeSantis' Florida. I still haven't understood why. Apparently some so-called sexually explicit content. But in Norway, we have our own Anne Frank, a Jewish girl called Ruth Meyer, who wrote a diary, and she ended up more or less the same way as Anne Frank did. But when I asked everyone, do you know about Anne Frank? Half of them have been to Anne Frank's museum in Amsterdam. She's world famous. But Norway's Ruth Meyer, nobody's heard of her. So it's this shocking levels, which clearly appears to be intentional, of the country's legacy and heritage when it comes to minorities, is just totally, I mean, it's sanitized whitewashed out of their memory. So that's what we are focusing on. Of course, it's a thankless job, but where we are today is we're concerned because you mentioned Trump, and we could talk a lot about him and what's happening in Scandinavia. But the thing is, there was a time 800,000 Norwegians went to the USA. I mean, they emigrated from here because of poverty. 1825 to 1925, 1/3 of Norway's population went to the USA. Many Norwegians don't want to be told about it. What did they do in the struggle against racism, or the conditions, the racism that they clearly witnessed? They decided to join, of course, the majority, and they became white in the sense of you're part of the majority here, and you just accept that there are slaves. We haven't heard of Scandinavians who fought against slavery. So it's these things we're trying to connect the dots, because we have some professors who say you'll need to stop importing theories from the USA, and we don't need to, because 1/3 of the Norwegian population was there and were part of the beneficiaries of the Homestead Act of 1862 and other. So we're trying to show them this connection through these courses, that it's entwined. Like you brilliantly put it in the beginning, this is a global kind of thing. And as Charles W. Mills, just so powerfully put it, this racial contract, whether they were in Australia, wherever they went, how is it that they thought along the same lines? They did the same thing to the Aborigines in Australia. There was this program of weeding out the Aborigines, the Aborigine out of the children that they basically apprehended and brought up in white homes. Same thing happened in Norway with the Romani people, the travelers. They wanted to weed out the traveler out of them and make them good Norwegian Christians. So I'll stop there. So it's a global thing. We're trying to show them Norway was part of it. And just because you give the Nobel Peace Prize and you've been doing a lot of good otherwise since Norway found oil in 1971-72, does not, do away with the ugliness of the past. And they are yet to come to terms with it. So that's basically where we are today. Go ahead.
Awesome. Doctor, I'm not sure. Let's see. I'm gonna see what happened with my line. I'll disconnect it and run back in. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Okay, that's better.
This service is provided in high definition by freeconferencecallhd.com. There are 4 participants in the conference. Q&A session has started. The recording has started.
Okay, Dr. Thomas. Can't believe that. I didn't know what that noise was. I could hear you fine when you were giving your detailed response, but when, I guess it was on my end, and then when I went to speak, it intensified and it was really distorted. Anyway, got that corrected. Context of White Supremacy, our guest, author of Too Black to Be Here, Dr. Paul Thomas. Hopefully, in the time that we have you, I want to try and see if we can cover as much as we can. So certainly give us as much detail as you can, but maybe you can condense a little bit just so we can go over some of the details in your book. Maybe I can read a few snippets and try and cover as much material as we can about what's going on in Norway. Maybe even get in a quick word on Greenland and Trump's situation at the end there. I guess I forgot I hadn't even registered for listeners. For folks who have not been to the website to see you or seen the brand new book or your books, plural, that you've authored, you are classified as a non-white male. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay.
My origins are actually Somalian. You mentioned that earlier with Minnesota. So, yeah, that's my background.
Right. And I guess Are you classified as a black male, or what is your racial classification?
A black African, yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, but here it's hyphenated in terms of, the official, I guess, nomenclature would be Somali Norwegian. That's what they use here.
I see. They might just call you a Negra here. I've seen Dr. Thomas, and he is too black to, for sure. Back of the bus. You, James Baldwin, all the rest of y'all, back of the bus. How long have you been in Norway?
Well, I've lived here for 35 years now. So, yeah, most of my adult life. I'll turn 55 this year, this August. So it's most of since 18.
Wow, since 18. Okay. I'm just trying to process that in my brain. What do you recall that experience arriving as an 18-year-old in Norway? And at that time, I'm assuming it was even more homogenous at that time. So I suspect, wow, it could have been 90% white at that time. Like, do you remember what that? Go ahead.
Yes, you did mention that earlier, and I'm just impressed with the background work you've done in the context, etc. Given that this is a small country of 5.5 million people, it punches above its weight. But yes, when I came in 1989, actually, when it comes to Oslo, the population of non-Norwegians or immigrants was like less than 2%. Today, in 35 years, it's gone up to close to 37%, believe it or not. So where all the problems are coming from. The drowning. That puts it all in context.
That is, I guess, for Anders Breivick and many, that is not funny at all. But wow, that is staggering to come from 98% white, really anything 90 plus, like, wow, that is, to now 37%. Wow.
That is in the capital Oslo, but when it comes to the national statistics, 20%. So 1 out of 5 in Norway is not Norwegian. I mean, we call ourselves Norwegians, but most people with our backgrounds, as long as you're non-white, and it's exactly what you're referring to, because these countries have been homogenous most of the time, although academics keep reminding people we've had 5 national minorities, the Sami, there were Jews, there were the Romani, different groups here, but the myth has been that it's all been 100% white, more or less, and homogenous. So now with the seismic change since the 70s, we talk about something called replacement theory. This is a big thing in Europe now, and that's why we have to have this discussion, as you started out saying in the beginning. Go ahead.
Wow. That is staggering. Therein lies the problem. Indeed, too black to be here. My goodness. I get my bearings from that. That was more than I even expected. Well, going back to 18, so you arriving as a young person at 18, I'll take what you shared with us earlier. So you arrive as a young black dude, 18 years old, in a country in Oslo, 90% white at that time, probably more than. Did you have the language to articulate what was happening to you as a black male at that time?
Interestingly, I didn't come directly from Somalia. I had been sent to what was called an Anglo-Indian British, one of those schools from the old, the Victorian kind of heritage. The British, as you know, colonized India. So my parents, it was quite common at that time, if you wanted your children to get some education, send them to abroad to some, a school from the colonial days. So I was sent to one of those hill station schools in India where everything was in English. The remnants who didn't leave to go back to England, started these, or rather kept these schools going. And because of the English, because of the heritage, I mean, I studied Shakespeare in the original language and William Wordsworth and, the God Save the Queen and all of that. So I felt more like I was in England while I was in India. So I came with an English education, but I quickly found out that given the fact that, in Norway, it's like, where you from is the first question. And once they heard Somali, it's like, well, all of you are going to be placed together. As I'd come as a refugee, actually, back then, because of the civil war in Somalia. My parents came first. So I came, I was the best student, actually, back in my school. And I'd even been given a double promotion from the 2nd to the 4th grade. They called it double promotion there. And so when I came expecting, okay, I have come with what the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu calls cultural capital. And I thought they're going to, take cognizance of this and build on it. But it was more like, no, none of you will get any special treatment. You're going to begin with ABC. And so they put me together with people from Afghanistan, from other parts of the world. I've written about this in my autobiography where because there is that approach in Scandinavia where they're still struggling with it. If somebody is not white European, you basically are uneducated, primitive. And so we have to put you in these classes where they were even trying to teach us how to eat with a spoon, with fork and knife. So it's crazy. And so it was a devastating psychological blow. It took me some years to actually recover from this. And when they came to know that he actually is educated, he does know something about photosynthesis and algebra, it's like, no, where did you learn that? And anyhow, we don't want to hear. So they would bring people who were, hardly finished their high school to teach us. So that's the legacy we had to fight, overcome, a lot of resilience. So it's still there today, where if you are not white, you basically have a deficiency. And even as a professor, I remember the first time I came into a class, new students, I came early, and the students would come in one by one, look at me, and I'm standing in front of the blackboard, but they would act like I was invisible and go out. So we were like 15 minutes over time, and I came out. I said, "Are any of you planning to attend this course?" They said, "Yes." "Are you the lecturer?" And they turned red because they've never imagined there would be a black professor there. So there is this, these microaggressions, if you want to call them that, where there is this notion black person clearly in Scandinavia doesn't know much and needs help. It's if you've heard of the Puerto Rican professor Eduardo Bonilla Silva, who talks about, he was once asked, he wrote the book Racism Without Racists. He was asked the question, so what can white people do to ameliorate this problem? And he said, stop lecturing black people. He said, you have this disease where you have this need to try to educate us and tell us something. And when we first read this, we really cracked up, because this is basically the status quo. This is the way things are. You can't almost, as a black person, I mean, I've had to fight with myself to say, you actually a professor with a PhD from King's College. A professorship in Norway is equivalent to 3 PhDs. And you've got to publish a lot. So why is it that you lack this confidence to actually go, teach and go in there and use your authority? Because the country is struggling with this legacy where, you don't have your Cornel Wests here, your Du Boises, over 100 years ago, the first black, sociologist from Harvard. We're just starting now. So it's an uphill struggle here. Over to you.
Wow. That is joining us live from Norway with a PhD and thorough training in use of silverware, Dr. Paul Thomas. He knows how to use a spoon. I am learning so much. It is fascinating. That's why we wanted you on the program and chatted up about the new book, Too Black to Be Here. That the segment, all of it really, the whole section about India, all of it, but specifically the section about you. Hey, I've arrived. I've gone to school. I've got all my credentials and what have you. Done Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man. I've collected all the pieces of paper that you all have told me to amass. I go to teach the class, and I would presume it would have to be a good number of white students. They pop in and, what? And you said it was like you were invisible. And I would just, words are important. You said that some of your colleagues, because they did not have the precise, accurate words, they succumbed to the pressures of white supremacy. That happens to a lot of us. I would offer mild pushback on that word invisible in that context, because if you were invisible, if you mean invisible meaning they don't see you, they would have sat down. They would have just sat down and, hopefully the instructor will come in here at some point. What I think happened is they entered the classroom and they said, oh, look, Schwartz Pete is up there. And then they thought of it and said, wait a minute. Schwartz Pete is not going to teach the class, is he? Schwartz Pete? Oh, no. Schwartz Pete is not fit. Did you see they got Schwartz Pete up here trying? They got Professor Pete in it. No, I'm not going to do it. I very humbly, I could be totally wrong. Maybe I have a misunderstanding of Schwartz Pete as it relates to us, but that's what I think happened. You are not supposed to have no nigga, especially in no, like, oh my, and even very respectfully, if you were here in the U.S., we don't have no black male teachers either. The same thing could have, well, I guess it wouldn't have been Schwartz Pete. I guess they might have said, whoa, who is that? Is that the janitor? Is he supposed to be? Where's your broom at? Are you supposed to clean the toilets? Or I'm going to go call security because I don't think he's supposed to be. Let's go cut. That's what I think would have happened here because we don't have no Schwartz Pete. I guess for one, let's make sure. Do they have Schwartz Pete in your part of the world? Because I thought I did catch that in the text. They got Schwartz Pete in Norway? This is more something we associate with the Netherlands, actually. So it hasn't yet arrived here. But I did challenge certain comments in newspapers and others where they casually talk about, just off the cuff, Santa Claus cannot be black. That's like, so I seized on that and challenged and one of these elite commentators, and I said, it hadn't struck me that why don't we have a black Santa Claus? But I seized on the thought and said, why can't we? I mean, in the Netherlands, they don't allow blacks to become Santa Claus. Whites have to play that role. Are you serious? You are lying to us. Stop lying, Dr. Thomas. Is this true?
It's the honest truth. I mean, there was actually the comment. I've published this in an article, which is from the University of Pittsburgh, called "Race and Social Problems," and the exact citation from this elite commentator was, the only way Santa Claus can be black is if he fell through the chimney. And, that's what he said in Norway, because they don't have the short Pete. He can't, they didn't have this tradition of, what was the term they used, where the white actors put on black paint.
Minstrelsy.
That is it, yeah. So they don't have this here. So it's like, and I didn't understand why the guy was agitated about the notion of a black. So I didn't get the first part of the discussion, but apparently somehow they were talking about, they came across blacks saying they want to have black Santa Claus. And these elites were like, no, now this is wokeism. And we can't have that here. So it's like, so we had an email exchange. What's your problem with that? I mean, it's like Muhammad Ali was talking about how even Tarzan in Africa had to be white. He can't be black. And, the white Tarzan spoke the language of the animals in the jungle in Africa. And, he would defeat the gorillas and fight with other animals. And, he was king of the jungle, a white man. And so they don't see this hypocrisy where, because of our culture says Santa Claus is white. He is, a jovial, basically fat guy who gives all these gifts to children all over the world. So my argument was, why not a black Father Christmas? Because it would mean that he comes from the north. What they don't say is what's important. Like here, Santa Claus comes from the north. He's this big guy. He's rich. He gives gifts to those who behave well and the poor. And that's something only whites can do. So that was what really was disturbing them, because you can't have a black Santa Claus giving gifts to poor white children who would be thankful. So it's interesting that the racism is so deeply ingrained that even these fables and legends cannot be changed, because it would be undermining their worldview. And for us, looking at them, what shocks us is, my goodness, they have to hold on so dearly for life to these, white supremacy, even in fables and legends. That's, I think, interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I too, sir, think it is fascinating, because they had that same rigid dedication to, because we've had those same discussions here. Santa Claus has to be white, and oh my, what kind of radical militant are you talking about? A black Santa? What? That is the crazy. We have had those same conversations here. No, we don't have Black Pete here in the States, but exact same thing. And it was page 47. I knew I read it. I know the Netherlands is not Norway, both ends, but I do have at least a D- grasp of geography for listeners, so I get it. But they are kind of close. If you look on the map, they're close enough that I suspect Black Pete is known throughout the Scandinavian lands. I suspect they all know about Black Pete, Short Pete. He has on page 47 of Too Black to Be Here, talking about these fables. Children's understanding of Black Pete also underscores the problematic aspects of his portrayal. They recognize him as subordinate to Santa Claus, often referring to him as helper or servant, and sometimes even as a slave, indicating an understanding of an oppressive relationship based on servitude. Black Pete is depicted performing menial tasks under Santa Claus's command. The controversy over maintaining Black Pete in blackface has propelled calls for change, highlighting a resistance among adults to alter a tradition that many see as archaic and racially insensitive. I'll pause right there, but even what you said, for me, it makes the point. I don't think it's when these sort of incidents happen, I don't think it's invisible when white people recognize you and exit the classroom. I think it's oh yeah, we see you, Negro. You are not supposed to be here. If you're going to be here, it's the janitor. You clean the toilets. You fix the desks. You are not supposed you are not supposed to be Santa Claus. You're not supposed to be in the White House. You're not supposed to be I see you, and I see it as a problem. In fact, you said when you came out and asked them, like, are you here for the class? I'm here to teach. You said they turned red. Oh my God. What? Black Pete is going to teach the class? Are you can set me straight. Am I making sense, Dr. Thomas?
Well, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. And I take your point. I take your point where it's they work hard to try to pretend they don't see. So I stand corrected in the sense, and that's amazing to me in the sense. But if I can digress a bit, because it's interesting. I have a friend in the Netherlands. He's white, His wife is Ghanaian black. And I've had this discussion with him. He's highly educated and he's well-to-do. I asked him, what do you think about this Blackbeard tradition? And he defended it. And he said, this is going too far. We've known each other over 20 years. And his wife was mad. And she says, and he said, we have this fight every year whenever this festival comes around. And y'all don't understand. And so after some time, we understood that. I mean, he has a son who is mixed. And so, you sit there and you really cannot believe what you're hearing. It just, I don't understand how this is processed in their minds. And I told him, that this is offensive to all the black people in Holland. There are demonstrations. He said, yeah, it's even getting violent. So don't you see the problem? I don't see it. It's our tradition. So go figure. Otherwise, he's a great guy. I mean, he just loves to be with non-white people. But there are these, what shall I call them? These, areas where my whole training has taught me to think analytically, but I'm still not able to understand what goes on in certain white mindsets. And it reminds me of friends in the U.S. I've been there a couple of times in 20 years, and one of them was a white Republican who has a Bible and a gun. And I tried to reconcile the two. And a great guy otherwise from Wisconsin invited me there. He met me in Ethiopia years ago. And we don't speak much today because of these right-wing. He's a Trump supporter. And I challenged him to show me, I may be stepping on some toes here with guns and stuff, but I'm not able to square that. And he's come to Norway. He's been challenged by some of my colleagues here. And he's admitted to, seeing the nuances. But there are these, what shall we call them, areas in the psyches of certain white people. And I'm speaking about the ones who are very friendly to non-white people. But there are these areas where, Trump is a Christian, he said. And I said, really, a guy who goes around saying, grab them in the pussy and stuff land. I'm trying hard to find out exactly how a person who says Mexicans are rapists, Haitians eat cats and dogs, Somalis are garbage. I've actually was interviewed by one of our major newspapers just a few days ago about this. And I said the history of genocide studies shows that once you describe a whole group of people in dehumanizing terms, that's actually what is a precursor to genocide. We know that from Hitler calling the Jews rats. We know that from even the Hutus in Rwanda, the fastest genocide in the world, 800,000 killed. They started by calling them cockroaches. And so once you dehumanize, that genocide may not be, if the conditions are right here. So it's this. So I challenged this American white friend. We're still in contact sometimes, but the relationship has basically been blown to smithereens by Trump's policies, and said, there's just no way this man can be a representative for Christianity. I refuse to accept that. Go ahead.
Calling black people monkeys. I'm curious. What was the context of your white friend who is a Wisconsinite that I guess paused for Kyle Rittenhouse, got my Kyles mixed up, Kyle Rittenhouse, and Sade C. Robinson. What was the context of this white Wisconsinites visiting Ethiopia?
Yeah, I did forget to add that I'm one of those anomalous kinds of Somalis who, because of my experiences in so many countries and, being a professor, tend to be very open-minded. I did convert to Christianity when I was 15 back in India in the British boarding school. Not because of the school or anybody witnessing to me. It's a journey, an encounter I had. And of course, that was not well received, as you can imagine, by my family who are Muslims. And it's very difficult to come across Somalis who who are Christians. So I'm a convert, and I respect my family. They're all Muslim, and many of my good colleagues I work with are Muslim. It's just a personal experience I had. And so it was in this connection I traveled to Ethiopia. There was a big conference there. And I met this white Wisconsinite, and he was a pastor too, and while at the same time being a businessman. And so we, and then that's another thing I had to learn, because when I was 18, came to Norway, just to go back a bit, I looked for a church that I could attend in English, because I didn't speak Norwegian. And I came across an American church, and fantastic. The pastor was white from Louisiana. Those were the days of, shall I call it, blissful ignorance. So I've written in my autobiography, which is another story there, that the first time I experienced racism was actually a white pastor from Louisiana, because my first marriage, which I have 2 children from that marriage, was to a white Norwegian woman, Christian, that I met in that church. And he was like a father figure for her. And so these were the days I had no clue about racism. That's why I said I had to educate myself. And once the pastor came to know that we were planning to get married, or he didn't even know we were together, he panicked, came home to me and said, listen, he said, I'm sorry, he said, but your children will be off color. And I'm like shocked. I said, first time I experienced racism was a white pastor from Louisiana in Norway, a missionary. And I was like, didn't understand. He said, in Louisiana, nobody would greet you. I said, I don't know where Louisiana is. I said at that time, but I wouldn't want to go. So there you go. Yeah. So I had a lot of learning to do. I mean, the world was a crazy place. I said, if Christians, didn't Jesus say, love your neighbor as yourself? And this guy tells me that the children will be off color and nobody would greet me. And before, he had been on what they call furlough in the States. So I didn't meet him. There was another pastor from New Brunswick, Canada. And he was different. But before this other pastor returned, my ex at that time was, we were courting, and she panicked. She was crying a lot. So I said, what's wrong? She said, you don't understand. I've been in the States. I've been to Louisiana. It's a white church. They call blacks niggers there. And I was like, what? I didn't understand any of this. So she knew what was coming. And one reason the marriage broke down was thanks to that pastor. I ended up at the end telling him, I think you're a full-blooded racist. He was shocked. And I said, I stand by that. And you shouldn't be traveling around the world talking about Jesus if you first don't clean up in your own house. That's what I left him with. So, yeah, so these were part of the experiences that brought me to where just more, I still try to perceive all of this through empathetic, Christianized, love your neighbor. But we have to have this dialogue that you were saying earlier, not only because of the changing demographics. I mean, I'm living in a place, I actually live on a farm outside of Oslo. And believe it or not, in the 13 years I've been here, half this village is non-white now. Wow. And so the Europeans are panicking, and Trump is adding fuel to the fire, coming here, he and J.D. Vance, saying Europe he was in Davos, and he keeps repeating they seem to have an agenda. This is something probably coming from Steve Bannon and some of those strategists, where they keep repeating the same thing. We do not recognize Europe. This is sad. And so what do you mean by that? You don't know these non-white people that you meet in the different European capitals. You may see me and just say, oh, this is not Europe. So what are we to do with our blackness? What are we to do with you just want us to disappear? It's not going to happen. And so there is a professor by the name of Eric Kaufman. He's written a very controversial book, but what I appreciate about him, it's called White Shift. You may have heard of it, but it's now making a comeback. He's been silenced. He's been misunderstood. But 15 years ago, Professor of Statistics from the UK warned, way before Trump, that within the century, there's going to be a white shift in the demographics in white countries. They no longer will be the majority. He gave them 4 choices as to, what kind of a future to expect. And one of them was exactly the scenario that is going on in the USA, where basically, we will make America white again and go back to some fanciful time in the past where, whites were living in some El Dorado or Shangri-La of some kind. Or the UK example, where in the UK you have the fastest growing, ethnic group, which is mixed. And it's harmonious, generally. Sometimes half the English soccer team is mixed. Nobody has a problem with it. And he's given the other example of South Africa with apartheid, where they have their own little places called Orania, forbidden for black people to come. They're going back again to apartheid, etc. So he gave them these options. But the what's controversial is he made the mistake of saying that perhaps the world should allow white people to also be proud of having a white identity, and that's where the buck stops, because you can't say that. There's something about the history there. Nothing wrong with blacks and the others, trying to rally around a black concept and self-empowerment, but you whites can't do that. So we're proud to be white. White is beautiful in that because there's a whole historical baggage there. So sorry for the ranting and raving. I'll let you. This is what happens with professors. So you've got to keep me in check. Go ahead, Gus.
Context of White Supremacy. Our guest, Dr. Paul Thomas, joining us live from Norway. That final point that Dr. Thomas shared with us about the responses to these shifts in population, and what are white people, how are they going to respond to it, and white people saying we're proud to be white and all the rest of it. I think white people do a lot of that anyway, but it does get to a point that I raise all the time. What does it mean to be white? I have no problem with that. Like, hey, say it all day long. We're proud to be white and fine, no problem. I just would humbly submit. Now, what does that, I ask all the time, what is white culture? What are we going to stand beside? Like Short Pete, the noose? Like, what are we going to stand beside? Like, I don't know what else there was. Santa Claus? What would it be? White Jesus? You'd have to pick out, the accoutrement that would be appropriate for the white pride. But Taylor Swift? I don't know. You'd have to pick something. But I just wanted, it seemed like one extra sentence to move forward. You said, unless I didn't hear correctly, and then you can set me straight, Dr. Thomas, I thought you said that when you said that this white missionary who came from Louisiana, and he got upset because you were going to get married to this white Norwegian female, and he said, oh man, they wouldn't speak to you in Louisiana, which is true. And people would be really upset about this. He said, when you finally grasped, what this was, said, hey, I think you are racist, and I don't think you should be, going around and saying you're a missionary and talking about Jesus until you stop practicing racism. Did that end up causing you to divorce your wife somehow?
I wouldn't say it was the direct reason there, but definitely it played a huge part because.
How?
Keep in mind, he was a father figure. I'd been with him for 10 years. We've traveled to different places, and he kept inviting me to the U.S., etc. And so once when I was 21, I was anyway too immature, and I would take the lion's share of the blame for that marriage not working. But definitely, once you know that you have children, you attend this church, he's a preacher. He talks about family values, and those were messages that just were not finding fertile soil in my soul, because the only thing that kept coming up is, did he say the children will be off color? What does he think about my children now? So it just there are words that we utter that basically we can't take them back, and they live their own lives out there, untold damage. So I would say definitely it was instrumental, and because it was not just one thing. You see, he would have these other people coming, ministers from Louisiana. And that's another thing, because I thought, okay, the church is supposed to be, have some diversity. And, I've I know there are black Christians in the USA. So how come he just gets these white Christians from Louisiana? They're all Republicans. There's no back then it was George Bush against Bill Clinton, and I made the mistake in my trying to strike up a conversation to one of his fellow ministers from so who are you going to vote for? I shouldn't have asked that. He looked at me like I was crazy. He said, Bush, of course. What a question to ask, So it's like you have this little Christian tribalist mentality, which is thoroughly racist. And that's what's brought Trump to power now. So had I known that back then, and that's why I tell black and brown people today, you better, and here's the cruel irony, which of course for me is something I rejoice at. This pastor came clearly with the notion that he would be ministering to white Norwegians. Guess what happened with the years? Because Norwegians are not religious people. Less than 5% attend church. So he ended up with 75% of the congregants being black and from the Philippines. So, and he had to deal with that. It was clear to us that he was struggling because when he would invite these other fellow ministers to come, he was always working hard trying to explain why he didn't have white Norwegians in the church and why. So imagine what that did to us. And so I began to connect the dots that we are actually not wanted here. He would try to tell us, this is how it will look like in heaven, etc. And it's like, no, I think the damage is done. You didn't want us. So it was just a matter of time. And what I've learned from that is, you just can't attend these churches with white American pastors or missionaries. Wherever I travel in the world, I'm very careful now. Where you from? Okay, and what do you think about racism? Those are the first questions. Get down to business. Otherwise, you'll end up carrying this trauma, and I call it a trauma because especially when one is ignorant of the machinations, the mechanism of racism, it really. And the more naive you are, and who is more naive than an 18-year-old who loves Jesus and just wants to love everyone? And you can imagine the damage that did to me. So, but of course, as a Christian, I believe in forgiving. I believe in putting the past behind. And but one is wary because Jesus did say in the Bible, be wise as a serpent. That's the part I forgot. But harmless as a dove. And I had to study what is it about a snake that Jesus was preoccupied with, until I realized snakes gather a lot of data on their bellies, vibrations and, heat-seeking equipment. So they already know about you way before you come near them. So that's what I do today. And I advise young Christians, be a critical thinker, be careful, gather your data. Because it's sad to put it this way, and my white friends sometimes Paul, you're getting paranoid, but I tell them, listen, there's something about the white mentality where it's as if I call it through the process of osmosis, just they seem to know what it takes to have privilege, to go where there's power and money. It's like the Malcolm X joke. I think he borrowed it from the guy called Barry Goldwater in his autobiography. He talked about the white person, black and Jew, being asked, what one thing would you want? And the white person said, power and money. That's it, security and power and money. So whereas the black person, according to Malcolm X, said, all the money in the world and a party, So they're trying to, in the 60s, why we non-whites, blacks, end up getting, the bad side of the deal. So we need to, so what I try to do with non-white people now, and I'm invited for different courses and other, just informal talks. And I say we have to wisen up. We have to do our research. And I really appreciated your introduction there with reading books. I'm impressed with you reading the book and giving the feedback, contacting me, inviting me here. Really appreciate, because this is why I did this, and my university's paid for the open access $15,000, which I thank them for. I said I don't want to earn a single dollar off the book. This is important information for non-white people, because this is going to become more and more important, not less. This is about survival, and that's why I admire the Black American community and, the what y'all have been through, 400 years of this, survived, and even thriving, and put a president up there and said, we've got to learn from them. And this is not an option. It's a matter of life and death. So that's where I am, trying to gather information like the snake. So in India, they had a saying, I never understood it until I understood what Jesus was saying. They say that snakes, now hundreds of thousands of people die from snake bites in India, but they paradoxically have a saying, snakes save a lot of lives. And it didn't make sense until I realized, because snakes are able to, gather all this data way before a human being comes near, they know how to avoid the encounter. So it's something along those lines I try to do, try to understand what white supremacy is, why in the last 500 years did they, why is the world the way it is today? And, I actually teach at the university and say, because the discussion in Europe now, the big theme is, why are they coming here? And I have to explain to them theories like Immanuel Wallerstein, which talks about after the Second World War, how the U.S. created a system of concentric circles where the ones in the middle would actually benefit. And, with the whole world order that they put in place. And the countries in the periphery, the poor countries, are supposed to send their raw materials, which they already decided what price they're going to put on. So machines cost a lot more, whereas raw material is cheap. I mean, raw material like, when I say raw material, agricultural products. I mean, how do you compare the two? Food, which is necessary for survival, which comes from the global south, what was called the third world, is priced at basically nothing. And machines. So basically, they had this Bretton Woods meeting in the U.S., the name of a hotel, came together, the world was in ruins, and decided, this is not conspiracy theory, I teach this at the university. So this is the way the new world order will be. People are not aware that before there was something called the Marshall Plan, where Europe benefited because the Americans said, well, we need a trading partner, and we need our blue-eyed and blonde-haired brothers and sisters to do business with us and benefit. The Marshall Plan benefited the Europeans. They actually at one point thought of implementing something called the Morgenthau Plan in relation to Germany, because Germany were part of the Second World War. And they said, how do we keep them poor? And they said we should probably not allow them to industrialize. We should apply this, concentric circle, Immanuel Wallerstein, we call it world systems theory, on Germany to make sure they will never produce them, the Mercedes-Benz and the Volkswagen. So I have a book that we use as a textbook called Why the Rich Countries Stay Rich and Why the Poor Countries Stay Poor. And the guy is a world famous economist, and he goes around advising countries like in South Korea and others, y'all need to stop producing agricultural products if you otherwise. I mean, the West has already decided that you will never become rich. So the basically, to make a long story short, the system is rigged, and that's why you have children in the Congo working 14 hours, digging with their bare hands, not going to school for cobalt, which is used in our mobile phone batteries and our electric cars and other and what do they earn there? A few dollars a day. So when I have this discussion with the students and say, if you were in that situation and you know that the system is rigged against you, what is the option that you have? I would advise everybody there to come over to the West, to Europe, because they're not going to bomb their own countries. They're not going to, they will ensure, and that would maybe also, I can just quickly throw in this thing with Greenland. Why is Norway, Denmark, France and the UK and others mad, incensed with Donald Trump? For the same reason that these same European countries were mad with Hitler, because the racial contract says you do whatever your dirty business, quote unquote, whatever you want with non-white people, but the buck stops here when it comes to white people. That is the ultimate betrayal of infraction of the white racial contract. You do not attack fellow whites. I mean, we have decided, we've carved up the planet and the resources amongst us. So we at the university are not surprised, because Trump is doing what Hitler tried to do, when the Prime Minister of England went to Munich and told Hitler, will you stop your territorial aggression, basically, against white people? If we give you the land called Sudetenland, which is part of at that time it was called Czechoslovakia. And he said, yeah, I'll be satisfied, because there are a lot of German people there, Bronxos. So Neville Chamberlain came back waving, this paper there. I have had Hitler's signature, and they were singing for "He's a Jolly Good Fellow." And before the ink was dry, Hitler invaded Poland. And that's when the white world realized we have to do something. So something similar is happening now with Trump trying to, making a claim for white territory. That's unheard of. And that's why NATO is in danger. We are back to the 1930s. So if we use the lens of white critical studies, it makes perfect sense. Another theory I have is Trump is incensed with Europe, because when he says make America great again, he's talking about making America white again. According to CBS News, 450,000 people have been detained. I mean, would know this better than me, so I stand corrected, but 450,000 people in 1 year, mostly non-white. So they clearly want to reverse what's happened in the last few decades, but he can't do that if he does not also do the same in Europe. So here comes J.D. Vance, here comes Trump to Europe, and keeps talking in clearly racist terms that the Europeans know. This is not even a whistle call. He's saying make Europe white again. Because if y'all don't do that, the white population, which stands at 10% in the world, is in danger. So this is why he's using this threat of NATO. We're not going to defend you. In fact, we'll take your land. And they've released these Epstein files. And many Norwegians now have understood the top-ranking people who are part of this. But why is Trump doing this at this time? Because firstly, they refused to give him the Nobel Peace Prize. But secondly, there's also this thing about you Europeans are no longer signatories to the white racial contract. We need you to get on board again. We need you to sign the contract of white racial, supremacy. And otherwise, we could attack Greenland. We don't care about, the things that you value, because we want, and Europe is trying to slowly move away. It's their history. They're the ones who've had the First World War, Second World War. They know racism doesn't work. And they're not really interested in making Europe white again in that sense. So sorry again for being long-winded there. You got carried away, but I'm trying to put these things together to show it really is a white, we are not paranoid. It will make more and more sense. I've had Norwegian newspapers contacting me now, asking me to write this because, it's always in their blind zone. But now they're saying, actually, yeah, we do need to understand how whiteness works. So people are getting on board. Otherwise, you can't figure out what Trump and J.D. Vance are doing. J.D. Vance keeps attacking professors. They are the enemy. Why? He has an education from, was it Yale or Princeton? Why would you attack professors? Because professors speak truth to power, many of them, not all. And we go where the evidence takes us, and it's taking us to the point where it says, oh, you people want to make Europe white again. I mean, and this whiteness, you're right. The whiteness studies tells us, remember, there was a time that white people in the USA, did not want immigration from Italy, from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe and Russia. Neither did Hitler believe that the Russians were white. They wanted to wipe these people. But later, when no one else was coming from Scandinavia and what we call the Anglo-Saxon countries, which are on top of the food chain, then they said, well, we would want just others to come as long as they, are somehow white. And so they accepted the Jews, they accepted the Italians and others. That's why Noel Ignatiev, he passed away, he was from Harvard. He wrote the book, How the Irish Became White. Now, the Irish are white, but Catholicism. So this WASP ideology is still very much alive with Trump and his, and they really believe they can turn back the clock, and that's why we're all in danger. I'll stop there. Go ahead, Gus. Thanks for the patience.
Much obliged, Dr. Thomas. We had some folks who dialed in as well. So before I get a question from them as well, you mentioned Noel Ignatiev, and this is for your book, Too Black to Be Here, Exploring Racism in Norway Through 4 Critical Case Studies, which just was published 2025, so kind of hot off the presses. And he told us kind of stunningly that this book was for non-white people, victims of racism, so we can better grasp what's happening on a planet dominated by a system of white supremacy. Stunning. And the university helped him make the book for free. That's probably how Gusty was able to get a copy of this book so quickly. But you just mentioned Noel Ignatiev, and he wrote the book, How the Irish Became White, has the website Race Trader. He's been a guest on our program, and I was looking at some of the different folks that you reference in your book. A number of them have been guests on our program. Dr. Peggy McIntosh, Linda Alcoff, both were with us. Not Frantz Fanon, obviously. You also referenced James Baldwin, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Kimberly Crenshaw, Frederick Douglass, who we mentioned before, Charles W. Mills, who was a guest on our program. I thought these are, one, I was impressed. These are a lot of U.S. authors, and Dr. Tom, well, he has his doctorate, so obviously he has done his homework. But these are a lot of U.S. authors on racism, and that was one of the first things he said on the program, that doing his respect and talking about the influence that black scholars in the U.S. and black people in general who've made an effort to combat racism have had on his understanding of this problem. It is super reflected in the book. I thought these are names that I hear frequently, the names I just cited. These are, and part of it was because we had a number of guests on the program in the last 4 or 5 days, and these names have come up frequently. These names come up all the time anyway, but Kimberly Crenshaw and intersectionality, and Frederick Douglass, and Frantz Fanon, James Baldwin, mandatory, Dr. Peggy McIntosh, these all the time. When people talk about racism, I'd say these are names that I might even say are considered safe by people classified as white. If you're going to discuss racism, these are the people that you will be allowed to reference, just based on how frequently I see these people mentioned. I wanted to see, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing? She wrote the book, The ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors. Are you familiar with that book?
No, I'm not.
That's one of the ones I don't see as frequently, but she talks exact, and what we've been talking about in terms of the demographic shift, that is what she centers as being the reason why we have a system of white supremacy, is white fear of white genetic annihilation. And that she even posits that's why your white friend who's married to black female, I think Ghanaian female, we got to have Black Pete. I mean, we can't let go of Black Pete. All of that dedication to this, the fables and children's story and all of that, even we got to have an image of white Jesus, even though that's not historically accurate. We have to be dedicated to all of this is because a fear of white genetic annihilation, and that's what's motivating the practice of racism. That's what that book is about.
Give me the name again. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, absolutely. The author, her name is Frances Cress, Cress, Welsing, Welsing, and the book is The ISIS Papers, ISIS Papers, and it's all about racism. She's been a guest on our program many times. She passed away about a decade ago, but she spent about 50 years as a general and child psychiatrist talking about white supremacy, racism, and what to do about this. She talked a lot about words being very important. She did lectures all over the world, very important. She's one of the authors, people that white people often do not consider acceptable to talk about racism or what have you. But I think that's because she was very accurate about this problem. I was going to ask also, especially when I read the part in the book, you said that they had like food seasonings that are from the brand, I guess, Black Boy. So like Black Boy Pepper, Black Boy Paprika. I had never heard of that in my life. So I went and looked online and I saw some of the pictures and stuff. Woo! Are you familiar with the book, The Delectable Negro, Human Consumption and Homoeroticism in U.S. Slave Culture by Vincent Woodard? Have you heard of that book before?
No. I'm jotting all this down as you speak. Continue.
That is that right. Actually, the two books that I just mentioned, the ISIS Papers, Delectable Negro, those are in my top 10. The Delectable Negro is the #1 book I cite in terms of what is this problem, how to understand what is happening with white supremacy, racism. That one right there, because it focuses so much on why do Benjamin Hermansen. I'd never heard of that case until I read your book, but it focuses the Delectable Negro on why white people focus so much attention on black males, as does the ISIS Papers. And it even gets to a lot of the components of racism that white people don't allow you to discuss. All of the sodomy and rape of male slaves, they'll allow to a degree. If you're going to talk about slaves and being raped, they'll allow white men raped black females and Sally Hemings and that sort of thing. They will not allow, oh yeah, Rufus, we raped him too. In fact, that's a whole book, Rethinking Rufus by Dr. Thomas A. Foster. It's about the same thing, that had to be a big part of the plantation. That's why you see that reflected in a lot of the sodomy in police departments and how they abuse black males now and in the prison system. But the Delectable Negro gets at the consumption of black people and the control of food, which is so intensely important in the system of white supremacy and starvation, and how control of food in terms of how the slave plantations operated, and even something like Black Boy Pepper. It talks about that sort of phenomenon and niggertoes, and Delectable Negro is amazing, and I end up talking about that book about once a week, sometimes more frequently. Let's see, one more. Neely Fuller Jr., The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, textbook, workbook for victims of racism, white supremacy. It's a long title, but sometimes they'll just shorten it and call it the code book. But are you familiar with Neely Fuller Jr.? Oh, did you hear that one? Neely Fuller Jr.? Is that one his work familiar, Dr. Thomas?
No, I just lost you for a few seconds there. So, but could you give me the name again of the last book you mentioned?
Absolutely. Neely, it's Nelly, last name Fuller, Fuller Jr. That's the author. And then the title is The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. And then it goes on, but that should be enough. But, oh wow, that's also top 10, massively important. He's been a guest on our program as well, Mr. Fuller. And this is a black male. He spent about 60 years, maybe even more, writing, talking, lecturing about white supremacy, racism as a system. Many people credit him as being the person who started talking, thinking, writing about racism as a system, not as just these individual incidents, but as a total system in all areas of people activity, labor, economics, politics, war, religion. You talk about religion in the textbook, but super, and words, the portion at the beginning when you talked about your colleagues lacking the language to articulate their victimization, that is exactly what in fact, he wrote a whole word guide where he talks about words to use, words to not use, that reinforce the system of whites, like the term minority. He'll, encourage caution about that. And a lot of the word fair, he encourages not using that term because white people have equated the word fair with justice, beauty, being classified as white, and correctness. So it's almost like you are not deserving of just treatment unless you are classified as white. So just things like that I think a lot of people, I know I overlooked, but just the importance of words and being very mindful, very careful about the way that we use words. It is a phenomenal book about the concept of racism and counter racism, things that non-white people can and should do to solve this problem. And a big one being attentive, even a word like invisible. Mr. Fuller would call, what do you mean invisible? Do you mean that white people literally cannot see us? Because I don't think that's true. Like, he major influence on being accurate and precise with the way we use words to discuss white supremacy, racism. Those would be three, and all three of those I would say are books that white people would not encourage, that white people would try to make it difficult for non-white people to access or charge a lot of money, or they might even be on the book ban type of a list, like, oh no, you can't have this book, that sort of thing. But those I would just be, I think those works are way more relevant than like Dr. Peggy McIntosh, who's been a guest on our program, Noel Ignatiev, who's been a guest on our program. I think those works are massively, exponentially more relevant and important to our understanding.
Right.
Can we get a question from a listener really quick? Is that okay, Dr. Thomas? We had a listener who had wanted to get a question in. Is that all right?
No, not a problem.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Octavius in New York, did you have a question for Dr. Paul Thomas, joining us live from Norway?
Greetings, Gus, listeners and callers. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, spending time with us in regard to this conversation and sharing the information. One of the things I wanted to ask you is the rate now that you see happening in Norway. Do you see the situation where there's a minus birth rate going on in Norway as well, accompanied with the migration?
Thank you. I'll probably need a little help from you, Gus. The line was not that clear. What I did hear was, is there basically is the population in Norway diminishing? Minus? Is that what the question was?
Octavius in New York, if you want to give it to us one more time.
Sure. I was asking if the white Norwegians are actually lessening, minus birth rate per se, as opposed to the rate of migration coming in is actually higher. Is that what's actually going on as well?
Right. I heard you much more clearly now. Yeah, I think it's not the case in Scandinavia that the white birth rate is in trouble. I mean, of course, the government would want, our last prime minister, Anna Solberg, she actually did try to give some incentives for Norwegian women to have more children. But it's not the case that Norway and Scandinavian countries are struggling like in Italy, some of these other European countries, especially Eastern Europe. The birth rates are so low that clearly it will impact sustainability. I mean, the countries are in danger actually there, including Russia, but that's another. So in Scandinavia, no, but you're absolutely right to ask about in relation to immigration. Clearly, in fact, just people are obsessed, and with good reason. 3-4 days ago, one of our politicians from the far-right populist party called the Progress Party came out, and it's interesting because these right-wing parties have been pressuring the statistics bureaus in Norway to keep a tab on certain statistics, and one of them is when would the white Norwegians become a minority in Norway? And apparently he found out in 2065. And so everyone's discussing this. I don't trust the far-right politicians as an academic, so I'm going to double check. But I think there wouldn't be any reason for him to exaggerate or lie about it. He's got a respected position. I wouldn't say a respected policy. So there you go. So you're onto something in the sense that politicians in this part of the world are obsessing about the statistics, and the question becomes, what do you do with this data? So if you look at it in terms of, are the numbers growing among white Norwegians in tandem with immigration? Absolutely not. It's two different levels. And would the Norwegian population be a minority in somewhere during the century? I think that is true. If that helps with the question. Go ahead.
Yes, that was excellent. I appreciate that, Dr. Payne. The other aspect I was going to ask is, in your work as a professor, have you found most of the professors are supportive of your work? Are they understanding your work at least, or at least to the least, can you say they respect what you're doing, like, to some degree? Is that the case?
Oh, thank you again. These are really important questions, and I wish people here would, formulate these kinds of questions, which tells you, that there is a strange. The best I can say is there is a strange silence surrounding my work with my colleagues, because what I'm being told by some is you're the first Black professor to be writing about this topic, which tells you, where we are in Norway in terms of talking about race relations. And so it's still uncharted territory. I can say one thing each time I'm in a public debate or write a newspaper article. About 6 months ago, I was in a debate about the N-word, because there was a big scandal in a school, high school. The teachers were using, I think, an excerpt from Malcolm X's book, and the one white student was reading aloud, and the word nigger came, and it caused all sorts of problems. So I was invited for. But whenever my experience, to answer your question, is that I really can't answer this, because there is a strange sort of silence where the tradition in Norway is academic freedom. In fact, in our university, and the conversation among other universities is what is happening in the USA cannot happen here. So we have to bolster academic freedom. I don't know if you're aware, but the European Union has set up a budget because many US professors are seeking academic asylum in Europe. So France has taken in 300 professors there's actually a brain drain going on in the USA. So one thing I can say is that there is a respect for opinions. We had the philosopher Voltaire, who said, I vehemently disagree with what you are saying, but I'm willing to lay down my life to defend what you're saying. I mean, just paraphrasing it. So that tradition so far is well and alive. And I'm very grateful for it, because as you can see, my university paid for this book, and they are not allowed to interfere in the gaze of my research. They would be in trouble. There are strong laws here. So again, it's a time where, in fact, as a educator of teachers, we have been informed by the government that they want us to focus more on critical thinking. They want us to focus more on democracy, resilience, because we're living in a time of fake news. So everything seems to point in the direction that the number one value in Norway is democracy. And I can tell you, most Norwegians are not happy with what Donald Trump is doing. And there is this fear that we don't want Norway to go in that direction. But that is not synonymous with my colleagues appreciating my work. I wouldn't say that, but Norwegians tend to be very disciplined in what they say. Judging from my inbox, whenever I, engage in these debates, it's like half-half. I get, if I get 20 hate mails, I get 20 emails of support. So, and mostly it's divided along the lines of ideology. The right-wing people who vote for the far-right parties, and let's put it this way: the far-right parties are doing very well, even in Norway, most of Europe. They could come into power soon. And that's what we are fearful of. Mostly the young male whites are voting for them. So if I were to, but then who are the people voting far right? It's more the working class. The elites, the highly educated, want to have nothing to do with them. So the same culture wars, polarization, believe it or not, it's y'all in the USA who unpack a lot of what happens here. So I think there is this, people are taking sides. They're afraid if Trump and his gang win, we're in trouble here as academics, professors, and progressives. So I think it's difficult. As you can see, I'm struggling to, groping to give you a clear answer. Me and my other non-white colleagues, we are not convinced that our colleagues actually support our work because, silence is not support. So we haven't had we've had a book launch and none of my colleagues came. People came from outside other places and many were not in the field of education. So if I were to gauge by that, of course my colleagues can always say we were busy and, but no information, nothing. So we operate under the assumption that, and I think that's what the literature says, we expect no help from anyone because this is, people ask me, why are you busy with this? I say, because we could die from this. People have died here. And so I don't think, maybe I'm leaning more towards, the more I think about it, that our colleagues are not happy because there is this Nordic exceptionalism which says, we don't have these problems. This is not the USA. People are not allowed to carry guns. Our police do not carry guns. So what is this structural racism that but these are the myths. So for instance, a recent report, United Nations came here, talked to black people, and they wrote a report. They said 45% of black people have reported severe racism. That's almost half. And the Norwegians were shocked and said, what? So there is this mismatch. So when you say my colleagues, I would say again, there is this silence. How do we interpret it? I think they have this belief here that, Martin Luther King, we gave him the Nobel Prize here in Norway. Obama, we gave him the Nobel Prize here. See, we are the good guys. So that's one of the problems we face. Sorry again to be long-winded. I need to be more disciplined to give you, what is it? Brevity is not my virtue. So back to you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Gus, I have one more question, if we have some time for that.
Make it quick. I was going to see if we can get one more caller.
No problem. This is just in regards to books. You mentioned a book called White Shift. We have a book here also probably similar. Well, there's a bunch of them, Starter, The Rising Tide of Color, and then the Turner Diaries. I'm wondering if you have any other work that's somewhat similar that we should look into that's, on your side of the globe. Anything else that's such as similar to White Shift? And I'll mute my line. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I should say that in terms of, established books with experience, and I would defer to Gus. I've learned a lot here. We trying to catch up with the knowledge that y'all have accrued in the USA. So I feel more I'm the student here. But the thing is, what I could speak to is, because you've asked about the books here. Norway, we're not there. Sweden, no. When it comes to racism, it's the UK. But then, so I would mention some names. A guy called Kahinde Andrews, Kehinde, and Andrews. He is now the, what would be the correct term? He's a go-to guy when it comes to racism in the UK. Earlier, you had a guy called, the main guru, if you will, was Stuart Hall. You may have heard of the name Stuart Hall. He was a big, academic, I would say global. Stuart Hall. He was behind the Cultural Studies School in Birmingham. Kahinde and his student was a guy called Paul Gilroy. So these are people with connections to, the blacks in the UK often have their roots in Jamaica and the Caribbean. So you have Paul Gilroy, Stuart Hall. Paul Gilroy has written a fantastic book. It's become a classic. There ain't no black in the Union Jack. There ain't no black in the Union Jack. And Kehinde Andrews is the guy who's basically taken over the baton, if you will, from these earlier gurus. Kehinde Andrews, the last book, he's the first he's the first professor of black studies in the UK. So that tells you something of it, even in the UK, which, they were big stakeholders in slavery and the whole thing. The only thing is most of their slaves were in the plantations, not in the UK. It's only been coming to light recently in the public eye that cities like Liverpool, Bristol were built on the back of slavery. So Kehinde Andrews, the psychosis of whiteness, and he talks about his struggle in the debates and when he goes to debate in the BBC and other places that are supposed to be liberal, the kind of problems he faces. And so he's come to the conclusion you can't cooperate with them. There's just no common ground. So Kehinde Andrews, definitely, Paul Gilroy, Stuart Hall. But once you read these writers, who I would say are, the standard, if you will, in European racism, it's so different from the USA, so different because, it's a whole long story there. But I would definitely say Kehinde Andrews today. There's even a guy called Akala. It's not, that's his, I think, artist name. He's also a rap musician. He's brilliant. He's written tremendous books that have become very popular here. There's one, I forget her name, but Why I Am Not Talking to White People About Racism Anymore. She's, I think, Nigerian background, has become very popular here. So these are some of the books I think that are, I travel often to London, traveling there next weekend, and I always keep a tab, keep a close eye on the big bookstores there, Waterstones, Foggers, and they've recently had a whole section dedicated to Black studies, and it keeps growing, it's burgeoning. So that's where, I've seen these books, I've read some of them, but so I'll stop there. Thank you for the questions.
Much obliged, Octavius in New York. I've learned quite a bit from Dr. Thomas as well. Got White Shift as we were chatting, looking at the psychosis of whiteness, surviving the insanity of a racist world as we speak. Akala incident, he reminded me, Akala also guest on The Cows. What have we been doing for our 17 years? And Global System, because he is a UK artist. Global System, absolutely. Our caller 3438. Did you have a question for Dr. Thomas live from Norway? 3438.
Greetings, Mr. Gus. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings, Mr. Gus, to Dr. Thomas and all the callers and listeners. I just had a question. Dr. Thomas, you had spoke about Africans moving over to Norway to basically flee there because of Africa, because they were worried about, they know that whites wouldn't bomb their own country. And I thought that was interesting. I always thought about it in more economic terms of why they were leaving. But I was just stating that to say, is there, in the United States, there seems to be a lot of non-white, influencers. I don't know if you know the I Show Speed. There's been an uptick in non-white people saying to go back to Africa, for us to go back to Africa and leave the United States. I was just wondering, in Norway, is that same sentiment there as far as the non-white Africans in Norway?
Sorry. Greetings to you too. Could you just clarify? I mean, were you saying? Are you asking about whether the Norwegians keep telling non-whites to go back to Africa, or whether we are considering going back to Africa.
No, not the Norwegians, whether just Africans, non-white Africans, whether you guys are considering going back to Africa. Like, it seems to be non-white black people in the United States. There's been a push of us to seem to go back. They're trying to say that we should go back to Africa, go visit there, go live there, move there.
Right. Appreciate that. Yeah, no, again, great question. And it's interesting because it just shows that, y'all in the States, we hear Norway, and these are the same discussions we're having with fellow blacks here. We have heated exchanges, but where I take the side where I say that we shouldn't consider, trying to uproot ourselves from here and move to Africa, because once one studies and understands, I did my master's on international education and development, and I was shocked to discover the kind of, what shall I call it, the kind of, iron grip that the West has on the so-called developing countries. I mean, you're probably aware of how during the Cold War, they used Africa and Asia. You know about the Vietnam War, the Korea War, the wars in Cambodia, and when one studies all of this, and when one understands the economic side of things, especially the economic, I have a book, I forget the title, but something about how nations collapse and what are the pillars that constitute robustness for a nation. And if you look at 7 or 8 of these, you don't find them in much of Africa today. And it's in the interest of many Western governments to actually prop up corrupt people in those countries. I've researched countries like Rwanda. The West sings the praises of Rwanda. And we know that there's no respect for the law. There's a dictator. There's the justice system is in trouble. There's no free media. Why is it the West? And you look at Donald Trump, he loves these strong men. Putin basically admires him, the guy in North Korea. So the West actually, and this includes not people like Trump only, Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, there was a love affair with these strong men in these poor countries. And it's not in their interest to seriously push them to ensure that all these pillars that constitute, why do African countries, not all of them, thankfully, but some of them seem to, they're built up and then they collapse every 20, 30 years. Why is it? And researchers have looked into it. And they found that several of these pillars are not in place. Mass education, gender, female education and empowerment, the justice system. So no wonder they collapse. So what does the West do? They have these aid programs, development, keep them dependent, but they never seriously want to see them really develop. One country that developed without the help of the West was Singapore. Their leader, Lee Kuan Yew, decided, look, the only way to do it is we have to mass educate our people on an elite level. We need to compete with the West on their own turf, producing the things they produce. So we're not there with Africa. And that's why I tell people, and some of my friends have tried, move there. I can't blame them. Yes, you're right, though, firstly, to answer your question, yes, they keep telling us, the Norwegians, where you're from. And where you're from, after 35 years being asked where, I drove a taxi for 7 years, years ago. Every day, I receive that question at least 5 times. And so what are your plans to go back? So the reason it doesn't make sense to think about going back to Africa, and some have tried and they end up coming back, is because they realize that actually it does seem through that the reason some of the systems don't work there is something to do with the way the global system has been arranged today. So I think, yes, they would want us to go back, and Donald Trump is trying to get rid of many, and he's putting pressure on European countries. In fact, we're hearing now a Danish, not a minister, but he's a prominent guy, called me just 2 weeks ago. They're trying to make a campaign to actually convince Somalis to go back. Imagine that. So I told him, why would they want to go back when y'all have the West has created conditions for them not to thrive? I mean, for those who know their history, you can, read Malcolm X and others. Read Noam Chomsky. He talks about what the CIA did to Patrice Lumumba, what happened to Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. Believe it or not, Ghana was richer than South Korea in the 60s. And so what's happened? Why is there this stagnation? Why these? So when one really looks at the nitty-gritty, you'll find that the West is benefiting from exploiting these countries. And as long as that is the case, it doesn't make sense to go there. Recently, Donald Trump bombed. He said he's trying to help Christians. They're being persecuted by Muslims in Nigeria. So that's what I meant earlier when you said they don't bomb their own country. He wouldn't do that in the West. I mean, Venezuela is another issue. They're all non-white there, and the Monroe Doctrine, etc. But when it comes to Nigeria, you can just go there and bomb. I mean, this is violating so many laws that we know of. The whole world order he's just mocking. So when he can do that in Nigeria, which is supposed to be probably the most powerful country in Africa, and with impunity, what else can they do in Africa? I mean, look at the collateral damage in Venezuela. They said up to 4,000 people, could have been killed. Who is accountable for this? So I think it's clear that white supremacy operates on the basis that there's this term called Cheryl Harris, whiteness as property. As long as they have this mentality that they can do whatever they want anywhere in the world, but they've been very careful with white property, which is something interesting that I'm watching, because with Canada, with Greenland, he's crossing a line, and it's going to have repercussions. You don't underestimate the Europeans. Germany has said we're going to soon raise up a 1 million man army. Once you wake up the Germans, we're all in trouble. So this is what's happening now. So sorry to very complex here, but I travel often to India. I'm in fact traveling soon to Zambia in end of this month. So I travel often, been to Ivory Coast, Nepal, so many countries, just Egypt in the last 2 years. And we study these things. We look at it with professors and others. It just doesn't make sense. As long as the West has got this chokehold on the world order, the dollar, the World Reserve Bank, the World Bank in particular, and the World Bank is a whole study. I think the World Bank is the key to understand why many of these countries are underdeveloped. Here you have a World Bank. Who voted them into power? They've got a huge budget. It's getting close to $100 billion, and they just go wherever they want in the world and offer you money. Do you need help? Here's money. What do you want us to do? Well, we need you to open your country, basically become a consumer market for the USA. So this is a bank. They are responsible to their shareholders, and they interfere in things like education in the world, health sector, to privatize it. Neoliberalism basically has always gone hand in hand with racism. So it's complex, but for all these reasons, I mean, I spend time trying to explain to people why you shouldn't try to, it sounds counterproductive. I understand it. It's people don't accept it, but it's about you build something there and they're going to break it down. So we first need to do something about the world system. We need to, that's a big ask for sure. But I think that's why I tell people simply, we can't. I'm not investing in Africa. I'm not buying anything there. I'm not going back there because it's been designed this way that anything in these weak, poor nations basically is just a matter of time before it collapses. It's a pessimistic note to end on there, but I'll get back to Gus. Thank you.
Much obliged for your question, our caller at 3438. Did that get your question, sir? Make sure he answered you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Awesome. Much obliged, sir. We have a 9-hour time difference between myself here in celebratory Seattle and Norway. I guess if I could get in a few quick ones before you enjoy the rest of your Monday evening, Dr. Thomas. One, were you were there in Norway? I don't know if you were in Oslo specifically, but you were in Norway when the attacks happened, Anders Breivick, in 2011 summertime. You were there?
I was there.
Wow.
Sorry. I correct myself. My daughter was actually very near where the explosions happened. We thought she'd passed away. I was not physically. I was doing my PhD back then in London. I just tuned into Sky News, and that's where I got the information. But we panicked because I called her mother, and we just didn't get any answer back. People were calling all over the place. So we assumed at one point, panicked, that she was in a bus very close. Fortunately, it turned out after a few hours we got through, and she said the whole bus shook, and the bus driver stopped and actually reversed out of there. So that's what happened here. So I wasn't physically there. I was in London. But it's left its imprint, as you can imagine, thinking you lost a daughter. Yeah.
Wow. That we talked about that case in great detail at the time, and immediately as an act of terrorism. And I remember it's in the archives. You can go back and look. July 2011. I specifically remember, and even Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing, who I mentioned, we talked about that as well, the fact that case, they did not discuss it as an act of terrorism. And I appreciate you in your book. You go into great detail about all these, other excuses, and, well, is he sane, and all of this. Like, man, this guy planned and plotted and wrote this lengthy manifesto where he gives all of his rationale for doing all of this, like act of terrorism, called things by their proper name. And I remember there were a few news outlets who talked about that as an aspect of the racism of all of this. If this had been, I can't even think, because I was going to think, wait a minute, Timothy McVeigh, Eric Rudolph, Ted Kaczynski, the Columbine kids, they're all white. I was trying to think of a black person who did all this, but I mean, please, they do not allow black people to go out and get bomb material and all this without asking. They don't even allow black people to cash a check. They don't even allow black people to pretend to be Santa Claus. We got a problem. We got a militant, got a red suit here. Uh-oh. Much less you got pipe bombs? What? Come on. At any rate, that is my one of the many recollections that I had about all this. And then when I was reading your work, I was like, wait a minute, this dude, they don't have you get to stay in prison for life in Norway, because they lock black people up, forever. They'll give you 15 life sentences and all that. Anders Breivick is going to be released, at some point, yes?
You're absolutely right, believe it or not. So, yes. The thing is with and then you see, that's why I dedicated several pages to this, with and believe it or not, I took a huge risk in actually trying to connect the fact that he was able to get away with planning all of this for 9 years, ordering these massive amounts of fertilizers, and he was on this farm not far from where I live, and he was just people ask, how did he how was he not on the radar? And I'm saying, because he's white. And actually this offended people in Norway. It's like, this is a crazy analysis you've made. But I'm not surprised that people in the US say black Americans were, educated about the topic like you, would have no problem understanding this. It's weird because we are not yet there where in Norway we can tell them, if you are serious about doing something about these so-called lone wolves, you mentioned the Timothy McVeighs, and recently, what do they call them? These the intelligence services, the secret service. They've actually come out with warnings time and again. In fact, one just 2 days ago. No, was it Saturday? They said the biggest threat in regard to terrorism is not Muslim fanatics. It's actually these right-wing white terrorists. And nobody seems to be paying attention. They still keep profiling black and brown people. And so that's how people like Anders Breivick escaped, because he was from, the west side of Oslo, elite background. It's no coincidence. I've documented how many things he was able to get away with, from just parking the van in front of the outside the prime minister's office. Who gets away with that? Walking away from there, they even picked it up on the monitor and said, I'm just somebody, a white guy delivering something. To him putting on the police uniform before he took the ferry across to the island. He just flips this ID card, and they didn't even look at it properly. So nothing makes sense unless you use the critical lens of whiteness and how it operates. So it's just that. But writing this, I wouldn't have dared to had I not been a professor who's tenured, and nobody could touch me for this. But it's offended a lot of people. I had one who said this is extreme. So that tells about where the debate is here. Yeah, go ahead. Back to you.
We got a Norwegian extremist visiting with us today who does know how to use a spoon. So he does.
Yes.
Wow. I don't. Did they pinpoint what part was extremist? Just what you said about Breivik, or?
Actually, it's a sensitive topic here where, the Michael Moore, the documentary filmmaker from the U.S. The guy that Fahrenheit 9/11. He's come to Norway. He's partly responsible for idolizing the justice system in Norway, where, among others, the criminal justice system works on the basis that you don't even call anyone a criminal. Everyone these people have made mistakes. They are trusted with knives in the prison. They live luxurious lives, and he said these people are civilized. And there's a lot of positive things to be said for the approach Norwegians have. But one thing we can't agree with, but again, I'm in the absolute tiny minority. Me and my colleagues, we said they're going to do everything to declare this guy insane. And sure enough, because that's the thing, you see. So what is sensitive is they don't like it when you question that, because it's like, hey, this is sensitive, this is serious, and you could even be punished sometimes if if a psychiatrist has come in and says somebody is insane. You're supposed to respect that, because psychiatry and psychology is extremely important, and yes, it is. But here's the thing: he was planning this for 9 years. The victims' families knew themselves that they're going to try to declare him insane. Why? Because that's one way to shut the population up, because Norway is most concerned about its reputation, this Nordic exceptionalism. Another academic called it the regime of goodness, because they spend a lot of money. They're like the golden boys of the United Nations. They're, goody two-shoes. They do everything that is nice and have this sterling reputation, and they didn't want that to be maligned by people saying, my goodness, here is a regular racist. So they don't like these labels, so they brought in a psychiatrist, very quickly declared insane. So basically, so I wrote in the book that, and this is what seemed to irritate a lot of people. It's like, this is a taboo. You don't speak, you don't write this way. I said, we follow the evidence, and I'm giving you a whole litany of evidences here to suggest that, the system here has a problem in calling a spade a spade. They are more concerned with the country's reputation. Whiteness and Norwegians don't do this. This is an anomaly. So he must be insane. But another a famous psychiatrist came in, I've written about her, and she refused to accept this against a lot of pressure. She did the tests, amongst others. There's certain accountability tasks, accounting tests and other. And 9 years, he's written the manifesto, which is 1,500 pages. He cites the Frankfurt School of Cultural Marxist Theorists. He is a brilliant guy. He's just filled with hatred, and it's like we can't have people who he must be clearly insane. He cannot be educated. So this is the thing we fight against, where Norwegians are not yet there, where they are willing to concede that actually we are no different from the rest of humanity. We may have a few good things going for us, but there is a phenomenon called white supremacy. There is this unconscious biases, and sometimes it gets very violent. And what was interesting, if I may add, is when I was watching this on Sky News, I was attending King's College London. It's an elite university. It's top 20 to 25 in the world, and we had something called the War Department, not War Department. That is the new name of your Department for War Studies. I shouldn't confuse it with the new, but this Department of War Studies, which is one of the few in the world, and it's got a global reputation. I really enjoyed listening to the professor speaking back then, because they asked him to explain how is this possible in Norway. And he said, this is the thing. These are his exact words. He said, Norway and the Scandinavian countries have often, he said, they have this reputation of, the Nordic exceptionalism, etc. But we forget that in their history, many people are not aware of a guy called Vidkun Quisling. Today, the word Quisling, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's an English word. It means that it's a word in the English Oxford Dictionary and means a traitor. I grew up using that word, not knowing this was the name of a Norwegian who famously betrayed his country in a monumental fashion, worked with the Nazis, and basically gave over the country to the Nazis. So this professor was reminding the viewers that there is this undercurrent, he said, of white supremacy in the Scandinavian nations, where, like I said, all the way to 1970, they were sterilizing and, people robbing the children of non-whites to make them Norwegian. So in this interview, he went back in the history. And I know a few people called me, were shocked. Is all of this been happening in Norway? I said, even worse. So this is the paradox, isn't it? So when this happened for us, we said, we knew these things were in the offing, and the reason we blame the system, because this is a form of structural racism. We as Black people would, it's the same with us, and the microaggressions are everywhere. I drive a Tesla X and bought a new one 6 years ago. I'll never forget, I was about to enter this ferry on the way to Denmark. Hundreds of other Teslas there. Norway is called the land of Teslas. And I mean, had I known that Elon Musk would take a turn for the worse and do the Nazi sign, I wouldn't have bought the car. I'll show you that. But the thing is, I had these policemen look at all the other Teslas, white people, say nothing, come straight to me and say, can we have proof of ownership? So we used to these things. I mean, okay, police don't shoot us and kill us, but we know we are always monitored every step. As soon as I move out of the house, I know I'm going to be held to different standards. I was at the airport not some time ago, and the policeman tells me, you have a visitor, we're not allowing him in. Although he lives in London and has got UK documents. So why not? Because we need to know your salary, who you are. So when I told him my salary, filled out the paper, the first thing he tells me is, he looks at my salary, and it's because it's double his salary. So he says, you can't be earning this much. Do you know that it's, punishable by law if you put down the wrong salary here. And I looked at him and said, well, what exactly makes you think just because of my skin color, you assume I earn less than you? I happen to be a professor. So the moment the word professor comes out, things change. People don't want to have anything to do with me. They just walk off. It's like, this can't be happening. And they don't know how to handle that, because most people who are non-white are, like you said, the janitors and all. So with Breivick, the thing which shocked us, and we still are trying to get Norwegians, because remember, I teach students, I mean, the teachers, I go in the streets, people greet me sometimes because I was, their lecturer. So they recognize. So every year I have this challenge where I try to make them understand that the treatment Breivick got is something every non-white person can easily identify and say, this is racism. We would never get away with all of these. So just that itself is a huge problem. If we can get white Norwegians to understand these are the privileges of white supremacists, or privilege, or whatever system that, term you want to use it, because I recently wrote an article in a journal about whiteness studies, and they don't want to see the term white privilege. And I don't understand that. I've checked who the editors are. They're all white. I don't know if that's the case, but there is white supremacy and there is white privilege. So when we say white privilege, like, because Benjamin Hermansen that I talked about, he told his mother often that you get privileges, I don't. Because if I'm walking a few paces behind you and the conductor, before I get into the bus or the train, does not see me with you, he's going to stop me and ask for, and she refused to believe it until one day it happened. And she came looking for him, and the conductor said, is this your son? And he's mixed, white and Ghanaian. So put all of this together, what we would consider progress here is if we can even get white people to understand what happened at Breivick was the moment, the teachable moment to understand this is why people died. They didn't need to die, this many people, 69. If you'll understand the machinations, the nuts and bolts of how white privilege, white supremacy works. But we far away from that. There was a little discussion. They tried to talk a little about whiteness, but they said, no, it's not that. This is just a crazy guy. He's a terrorist. So we lost that opportunity. So we go back to the back to scratch and are trying to again make them, because maybe this may prevent the next so-called lone wolf. They're not lone wolves. They're on the internet. They have a French guy who gave us this replacement theory, and there's the theory of Eurabia, which Breivick was into. Where did they get all of this from? They're a community on the internet. There's a professor who passed away now. He called it the internet ghetto of racism, where they feed off each other. They basically live in this bubble that the Professor Joe Feagin talked about. These so-called lone wolves are not lone wolves. They're all together in this bubbles on the internet. And unless we follow them there and we teach our populations about how this racism, replacement theory, etc., because you'll be amazed. I've had students, I try to create an atmosphere saying everybody can speak. I'm not going to report anyone. You will be allowed to be a teacher, but this is our chance to have a dialogue, however nasty, because we have to live together in this tiny country called Norway. And my children will play with your children, play football with your children. We have to make a serious attempt at understanding each other. Because believe it or not, even in Norway, which is an egalitarian country, doesn't have the history of the USA, and still there was a black British journalist, quite famous he's even been knighted as a Sir, Trevor Phillips in the UK. Years ago, he warned about Britain sleepwalking into segregation, famously. The same phenomenon is happening in Norway. I can take you to schools where you won't see a white face in Norway now. So how is this happening? But Norwegians say, no, that's nothing to talk about. All is good. Everybody's equal. We have the money. We pump it into. So why is there these balkanized, ethnically segregated enclaves all over the capital and the big cities. We are not having this dialogue. They don't feel comfortable when we tell them there's difference in treatment of skin color, whether it's the police, so even we've now tried to push the government to say to make laws that when immigrants apply for jobs or anyone, they will anonymize the applications. When police stop non-whites, they should be required to give a receipt. So this is how we are fighting back, and slowly, grudgingly, they are adopting these measures and finding out it's true, actually. Why are we stopping more non-white people driving BMWs or Mercedes? Yeah. So I'll rest myself a bit here and back to you, Gus, here.
Much obliged. Make sure Dr. Thomas hadn't stole a white person's Tesla en route to joining us today. He reminded me when he mentioned the good Tesla and Brother Elon, that is one thing Brother Elon, President Trump, and Anders Breivick all have in common, claiming stringently that white people are victims of racism. How in the world? And they're serious about it. Like, man. And it reminded me as well when he talked about the Nazi thread through the region of Norway and Scandinavia in general. When we studied Jonestown, that is not related to our dialogue today at all, I don't think, for the most part. Well, I take that back. The Nazi part, yes, it is. But when we studied Jonestown, and Michael Mayer's book was Jonestown, a CIA medical experiment, he talked about World War II and the impact of Nazi Germany, and Jim Jones being a big Adolf Hitler fan and studied Nazi Germany as well. But in all of that, he mentioned the Lebensborn Project. And if I had not been caught up in the Super Bowl and all the other programs that we were doing, I would have probably remembered that, oh man, Norway was mentioned like specifically as being a part of that, because Dr. Thomas mentioned eugenics earlier about having these, Aryan, white, and the best of the best, well-born white babies. That was that whole project of bringing those Nazi soldiers into Norway and getting them with Norwegian white women so that we can have the best of the white troops. And they have whole projects and books and reports and documentaries about all that, and the children and how they found out about all this shit. Woo, like, in terms of Nazi thread through that area, like, wow, that is a fascinating bit of research that's all related to white supremacy anyway, especially when you get to see the children and their blue eyes. Woo! Jonestown, I learned so much. I wanted to ask, before we let you enjoy the rest of your evening, or I guess mention quickly before I ask, because he talked about so many important things. He mentioned the CIA involvement in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. Did you, perchance, see the documentary film Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat? It came out last year. Did you see that?
No.
Oh my gosh. That is one of the greatest films I've ever seen. It is a documentary. It's about 2.5 hours long. It's all about, I went to Los Angeles, and I don't even like LA, but I went to Los Angeles to see it at the film festival there because the filmmaker, who is Belgian, he's a white man from Belgium, but he came to LA for the film festival. It is amazing. It is about, basically, the film is about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, and more specifically, it is about how white people all over the world lied about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. Excuse me, I have to say it correctly. How white people all over the world orchestrated the assassination of Patrice Lumumba and then lied about having done so. That's what the film is about. It is so receipt heavy because it is a documentary film. It does feature Hammarskjöld quite a little bit, even though it does feature him a little bit. But wow, it is so impactful. There's even a moment where they show black and white foot. Oh, it even connects to what you said about the black people digging in the dirt in the Congo with their hands to get cobalt for our iPhones and devices. that is in the film connected to the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. Easily one of the greatest films I have. It was nominated for an Academy Award. I forgot. White people also, they agreed with me. It is one of the best films I've ever seen. Johan Grimonpré is the white filmmaker, Belgian filmmaker, but soundtrack to Coup d'etat, and includes music. That's why it's called soundtrack, but it includes how music or black musicians were used as a part of the ruse to cover the racism of this time period. But it is just wow. It is staggering, and you can learn a lot from that too. Lots of books in there too. But my question was, you mentioned previously about your having some of these dialogues with your white friends, Black Pete and all the rest of it, with your white friends there in Norway. Do you suspect your white friends of being racist and, doing different things like this, supporting, Black Pete, and maybe being upset about having these immigrants and non-white people coming in and taking over the country?
Oh, again, great question. But by the way, it's I'm just so grateful to have been invited, and I'm sure you're busy with hundreds of things, but one thing I would have really loved to receive from you is a short list, maybe 10 books or whatever, with the immense knowledge that you are in possession of, with all these august guests that you've had over there. I'm envious, and I'm looking for a syllabus that I'm trying to build up here in Norway at the university, and I quickly looked at Frances Cress-Welsing that you mentioned, and Googled her quickly. I said, I've been watching these videos on YouTube of this lady, and how come? I mean, didn't register that name. So that proves what you've been saying. And I thought, wow, she is touching a nerve here. So these are some of the things we could benefit from on this side across the pond, and be very happy to credit you, acknowledge your contribution with this list here. I have a lot more, education to acquire. So, but coming back to your question about my white friends and the degree to which, again, I said great question, because see, we are so few in terms of. I wouldn't say not in numbers. We're growing, and there's a big change happening. But one of the challenges we face is there's a lot of fragmentation. Blacks are not united here. They don't have the same history as, let's say, the Jamaicans in the UK or in the USA. And I've written in my autobiography where I've actually critiqued even my own Somali people, because you just go to TikTok and you'll find most of them have a problem saying they're black. I said, what? It's like the Ethiopians too. I've been to Ethiopia over 20 times in the last 20 years, and there's identity confusion. Marcus Garvey sent a delegation to go to Ethiopia 100 years ago when King Menelik was in power, to ask for help, because Ethiopia has never been colonized. And he famously said, you made a mistake. You've come to the wrong place. We're not black. So what are you? So we are Jewish and Caucasian. I have the book. So this confusion is still there among some black communities. I've told Somalis, some I've talked to in the USA, there is a huge debt that you owe to the black Americans who paid the price, took the brunt of all the racism, absorbed the poison, and you can't ignore that. So we're having the same problem here, but among the few that we are trying to conscientize, to borrow the term from Paulo Freire, the Brazilian critical educator, we have discussed this. And interestingly, we've come to the conclusion that, because it needs some deep soul searching when you ask these questions, and to look again at beyond this veil of confusion, this miasma. And strangely, I've come to the conclusion, firstly, my experiences is there is this embedded, stubborn sense of, entitlement. And what is it based on? It's irrational. It's this sense that I'm white and I deserve to be treated better than you. nothing to do with meritocracy, with anything. It's just by virtue of being white. I've seen this time and again, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And then I read a book by Professor Jennifer Epcot, I think is the name. It's called Bias, and I have it somewhere with the rest of the time. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She's a psychologist from Stanford, I believe it was. She couldn't believe the results herself, where, they did these simulation exercises where they're looking at empathy in the brain. They hook them up with these electrodes, and then basically they're told, for instance, somebody, enters your house, and you're given, a second, a fraction of, or a second to decide whether this is a good person or bad, and you have to shoot or not shoot. You could kill an innocent person. And the results were consistent. Every time a white person saw a black person, the part in the brain that lights up for empathy did not light up as it should. And they quickly drew the gun and shot. And the person could be innocent. So she had to call her white colleagues, if I remember the passage correctly, to actually double check. And they were shocked. So how do you explain this? It's not hardwired into our genes. But what is happening clearly is the socialization. You see, Eduardo Bonilla Silva in his book, Racism Without Racism, speaks about the same thing. He said, don't look for racism in the police or some institution. Look for it at the dinner table. We're all part of this system where they drip feed this into their children from a small age, socialize them into, the part of the brain, the amygdala that deals with this flight or fight mode. It's prepped. It's years of basically conditioning. And that's what we're dealing with. So answering the question, sorry, I tend to go here and there, but that's what reading does and studying. But I look at the results from psychology, this implicit bias, we talk about unconscious bias, and what I've experienced with my white friends. It's clear that, I get mad sometimes and say, don't you think we're human? I've said that to the white friend in Holland. And I actually, at one time, his wife asked me, they've been married over 25 years, could you please speak to my husband? Because she was really tired. Their son was mixed. She said that whenever she goes to the school to discuss problems, they just ignore her, treat her poorly. But when the husband comes, they solve the problem because he's white. So she kept telling him, don't you see the difference? He said, I don't see any difference. You're paranoid. So even in the same household, you look at the same phenomenon, but two different conclusions. What is this? I remember an incident. I was in Kenya years ago on a safari, took my children to the Masai Mara to see the big five in the safari. And, there are these moments you're taken by surprise. And there was this long, messy queue at the airport when we disembarked. And then the guy shouts, the Kenyan, all are African black, and he says, all with European passports, Western passports, step to this side. And of course I joined them. I have a Norwegian passport. And he says, you, not you, only Europeans. And I went back obediently, sheepishly. And then I said, what? I have a European passport. Why did I? And then I realized that neither did he. He didn't believe that I was, European means white. And we internalize this without, you just go on this automatic mode. And I was like, okay, you're not white, so hence you're not European. You don't enjoy those. So I think it's this conditioning that we are fighting against, because I'm trying to ask myself a fantastic question. Why is it this? Why do we feel, why have so many, the father of Black liberation studies, James Cone, I believe, or Cones, Guterres, the father of, Latin American liberation theological studies, Black theological liberation studies, I think it was James Cone. Why did they all, he is a man of the cloth, Black American James, Harvard, I believe, he was working there, professor of theology. powerful brains. Kehinde Andrews in the UK, the first Black Studies professor. When you read their books, they've all come to the conclusion it doesn't work. I mean, they side with Malcolm X. In his earlier days where whites cannot help, this is something they'll never understand. We don't need their help. You're wasting your time trying to discuss with them. It's a lost cause. I am not yet there, partly maybe because of my, Christian ethos, love your neighbor and etc. But I can't help when I look at this phenomenon from the eyes of a researcher and go where the evidence leads you. It looks really seriously pessimistic. And because, you read the books of Martin Luther King, you read Oliver Tambo, Steve Biko in South Africa. They came to the conclusion that the problem is the white progressives, the liberals, and a white progressive liberal like Robin DiAngelo herself writes a book called Nice Racism. How basically, I forget the subtitle, but the liberals are the problem. And Martin Luther King says he prefers the Ku Klux Klan. They are honest. Whereas the progressives are the problem. So Steve Biko, Oliver Tambo said, if it was not for these white liberals at the universities, we would have, destroyed apartheid a long time ago, because they kept saying freedom next time, not now. Don't be so aggressive. So I think what you're asking is a conclusion I hate to draw, and I still want to believe, because we have to have a dialogue. Europe is changing so fast that it makes, I don't blame Trump for speaking out loud. I'm going to London this weekend. As soon as you land there, you see just brown and black people everywhere. For me, it's like, okay, the world is changing and you keep up with it. But I can imagine the whites who went from there and colonized the world, this is horrible. We are losing our country. But the famous reply that non-white people give them in the UK is, we are here because you were there. It's always, they forget they were there. They messed up countries in 1/3 of the world. Britannia rules the waves. Britons will never, never, ever be slaves. We used to sing that. So everyone else becomes slaves, but not the Brits rule Britannia. Britannia rules the waves. So, it's weird where, as Malcolm X said, the chicken are coming home to roost. And they're wondering, and Charles Mills famously said, whites misrecognize the world that they've created. So I look at all of this and I say, look, no, I've always had a very strong sense of justice. Give me liberty or death. That's my version of Patrick Henry. It's not just something reserved for whites fighting against other whites. And Malcolm X said this had nothing to do with us. Plymouth Rock landed on us. So I think it's there where we don't have a choice. It's probably going to get nasty and dirty because we cannot, there's no nice way to say this. But listen, the last 500 years, you guys messed up the world. Frantz Fanon said, you went over there. We didn't ask. Frantz Fanon actually says we didn't know what black was because everybody's black here. You came here, just juxtapose your white bodies against our black bodies, and then you began to define our blackness in opposition, in negation to your whiteness. And then we learned that we didn't have a chance to talk about what black means because we didn't think it means anything. It's normal. But you came, you told us it's dirty, it's filthy, and we are trying to recover from that. And I think that's the brilliance of Fanon. I've had white students read Fanon and just run away. Said, I can't deal with this. He's so incisive. So I think that's where, and I use Frantz Fanon in another book about, imagine in Norway in 1914, another thing none of my students seem to know, they had something called the Human Zoo, where they brought about 80 Africans they were from Senegal, but they don't care. They don't know the difference or don't care to know the difference. They call it the Congo Zoo, Human Zoo. And half of the Norwegian population came to look at them like animals in a zoo, looking at their blackness. And one of the main newspapers wrote, "Thank God we are white." So this was in connection with the 100-year, 1914, 100-year, the centennial celebration of the Norwegian Constitution, which was in 1814. So what did they do in order to show the world and their people that they're progressed, they're advanced? Bring 80 Africans from, you can Google it, you'll find it in the Guardian newspaper. I always show this to my students, say, how many of you knew right here in Oslo, Frogner, we had a human zoo of Africans, and half of Norway, including the king, came to gaze at black bodies and laugh at them and say, look how far we've come. So, you put all of this together. And when I talk to my white friends about this, I notice they're not at all appalled. It's like a tut-tutting, which is devoid of emotion. It's like, why are you busy with this? The world has moved on. So we talk about color blindness being the problem in this part of the world. We don't see color. Everybody's equal. And that's the magic wand they wave, because after that, they begin with the racism. So in the public domain, we don't see color. But they go home and they talk about black people in pejorative. So this is, so if you're asking me, and I'm kind of scared when I say this, but I haven't come across yet, and I'm surrounded by whiteness here, where they maybe one or two, but those are the people who define themselves as anarchists. Those are the people who are supposed to be on the extreme left, the type of people that the right wing is now trying to boycott and cancel and, etc. So am I ready to give up? No, I'm not yet there. I'll keep fighting, because I think for the sake of our children, the next generation, what kind of a Norway have I contributed to? So I write these books. There's always a silver lining in the cloud. Just 2 months ago, whenever I would send the manuscripts to Norwegian presses, publishing presses, they would always reject it. And then I send it to the best in the world, and they're ready to publish. It doesn't make sense. So finally, after hammering with Emerald, Brill, Routledge, these are the top in academic publishing. Finally, the biggest one in Norway contacted me and said, why is it you haven't written anything with using Norwegian publishing presses? I said, that's a question you have to answer. And she said, I can see where you're going. I'm ready to offer you a contract. Would you be willing to write a textbook for teacher training about racism? And that's what I'm working on now. So somehow, I think somewhere we have to keep the faith, because ultimately, I look at, sorry, no disrespect there, but the scene in many parts of the USA, and looking at what ICE is doing. There's, what's his name, Govino, what's his name, the guy dressed up like a Nazi officer. Everybody in Europe can see that. Those kind of uniforms are banned here. And, what is going on? We don't want this part of the world to look that way. I can still say that most Norwegians, despite what I've said, look at the U.S. and say, that's not what we want to become. So, long-winded again. Back to you, Gus. Thanks for the patience.
Wow. Much obliged for the response, Dr. Thomas. I'll make sure the book again just came out. He said he intended it for us, non-white people, victims of racism, too black to be here, exploring racism in Norway through four critical case studies. Fascinating study. If you want to learn more about white supremacy, racism as a global system, man. But thank you a ton for giving us such a detailed answer about some of your white friends there and their, I guess, unemotional tit responses about all of this. I thought, and after I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, it is really homogenous over there. So, or I guess less so now, but still, initially when I saw this book, especially, and I was like, oh, this is written by a Norwegian author. This must be a white dude. Like, I thought that initially, and then it took a while for me to get in the book. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this is like, I was so excited at first, like, wow, a white dude in Norway wrote this? Like, what is going on? Like, anyway, it ended up being way better. I was able to learn quite a little bit. I would be more than happy to jig my brain a little bit and think of 10 books that I think have been really helpful for me in understanding racism. You have 3 already, so I will see if I can crank out a list and get that to you as soon as possible. I do encourage reading a ton, because that's the exact, so we've been reading, we have a book club, so we read all the time, but that's the current book that we're reading in our book club by Shara Adams, Black Owned. She talks about the history of black bookstores in the U.S., and one of the main themes of her book is white people have invested about 300 years worth of time and energy to prohibit black people from reading, writing, and accessing books about racism. Like, if we want to read fiction and romance novels and all that stuff, great, read all that all day long. But the ISIS Papers, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Delectable Negro, even your book, oh no, nope, and make it difficult for black people to access those type of books. So I thought, man, even more so, encourage reading, looking for books. That's how we got Dr. Thomas here today. I was looking for new books about white supremacy, racism, and I found our guest for today. So, much obliged for sharing a bit of your, or quite a bit of your Monday evening with us. We super appreciate it. I learned a lot. I hope listeners did as well. I think I'd said I was going to ask, make sure I'm not neglectful. Did they broadcast the Super Bowl in Norway?
Oh, yes, actually, I have to say that, American, what do you call it? Football. Yeah. It's not something that people are familiar with. It's something like they consider cricket in England and India. It's not a game they're familiar with. But the Super Bowl, there's a growing interest, and the newspapers, the headlines. In fact, most of the time we wouldn't know anything about the American football until it's the Super Bowl, and then they always talk about the results. So it's more like a nation that needs to know what is happening in the world, the big events kind of thing, keep a tab on what's happening in the world. So I think they people at least are aware there's been the Super Bowl. Remembering names, not that easy, but I can always say that whenever some Norwegian news channel begins to talk about the big heroes and we as blacks here in this part of the world, you won't believe how much we follow otherwise with, I mean, the kind of what is the right word, the role models, in a sense, black Americans are to other blacks in Europe. We look to the U.S. for not only we talked about the giants and Martin Luther King and others, but even in the sporting world. And so when we see basketball has become a big thing, and when I talk to young people talking about Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and of course LeBron James, but these are becoming big names in Norwegian homes. Little children put up, it's a source of pride, and I think sport definitely is one huge way forward. With it has this what shall I say? It's part of whatever tools we can use, and we need to know what tools are useful for us. But I can't, whenever I go to schools, because I follow up with my teacher students, and when I talk to the, fourth graders, and what do you love? And I love basketball. I love LeBron James. And this is in Norway. So these are, I love the sprinters. What's his name? Lyle. I haven't been following since Usain Bolt, but, these are things, and then, the TV they watch, Denzel Washington. And so I think there's this whole industry there where what y'all are doing, and I want to take this opportunity again to really thank you, Gus, because the work y'all are doing means so much for people like me, and the knowledge, the keeping these conversations alive. So it's a whole. I often begin by telling my students, do you know there are more than close to 40 million Black Americans in the USA, and do you know that's more than the population of all the Nordic countries, 5 of them: Sweden, Norway, Denmark plus Finland and Iceland, and then I get their attention. So we really have we owe a huge debt to the legacy of Black Americans in the USA, and we are still highly dependent on the work y'all are doing, whether it's in sports or fighting in Hollywood, or just all the areas that Black Americans are being visible, because that's what the white gaze needs. That actually and I hear young Norwegians tell me, I just love Denzel Washington films. I love Jamie Foxx. So, and it's like, wow. So I think, and so you talk about Black owned, and I think that's what we need here. We like the USA went back in the I wouldn't say 40s, 50s, because they still had segregation of restaurants, etc. But we're not there. But in terms of the battle we are fighting and getting the white gaze to understand that there's nothing wrong with Black. In fact, Black can be synonymous with excellence, with achievement. I think y'all are the role models, and just appreciate all that you are doing, and appreciate you having me on. And a bunch of thanks for everything. Go ahead.
Pleasure was ours, Dr. Thomas. Again, hopefully folks can check out not just this book, but his many books, reports and things that he's authored. The new book that we've been talking about, Too Black to Be Here, Exploring Racism in Norway Through 4 Critical Case Studies, just published last year, Nabbit and Study. But thank you for sharing a bit of your time and insight with us for you this evening. We will definitely stay in touch. Book list forthcoming, as I said, and we will definitely stay in touch and continue the dialogue, more for us to learn about Norway and see if we can get this here problem solved. But thank you 1,000 times, Dr. Thomas. Keep up the outstanding work. Best luck. Keep working on the teacher training book. Maybe we can check that out and chat it up about that once you get that all complete. But thank you again for sharing some of your time and insight with us, and we will look forward to doing it again soon, sir.
Appreciate that. Thank you again. And it just struck me. I said, I see Gus standing in front of my students one day. Hope to invite you, and actually that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people who know the subject, and you are erudite, and we definitely would want to tap into that. So we have a budget for inviting speakers, and I'm sure we'll pack the auditorium and appreciate. So we'll definitely stay in touch and look forward to more blessings from your side. So appreciate it, and thanks to your viewers for listening to this. And it's a common struggle, and it's a struggle for, as Chinua Achebe, the famous Norwegian novelist, said, to right a wrong which has impacted a huge chunk of the human population. So in every sense, it's an important work. Thank you again. And you have I'm not sure what the time is there. It's 11, getting some close to midnight here. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and look forward to liaising with you in the future, Gus. You have a nice day.
Oh, you as well, Dr. Thomas. You get some rest, and I guess have a great Tuesday now, constructive Tuesday, and we'll speak to you soon, sir. Thank you again for your time.
Appreciate that. Take care now. Thanks again. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Morning. Good morning, Dr. Thomas. Context of White Supremacy. Wow. Global system. Can't say that enough. Global system of white supremacy. And give myself a small pat on the back. As he said, ongoing struggle. We have lots of work to do. Replace white supremacy with justice for sure. But, man, Gus T could have been out acting a fool at the tavern, rolling around in the street. Woo! Seahawks! Woo! Beat them Bammers down. Told you Patriots won't go do nothing. Here, preparing for our guest. Priorities. Time and reading about Anders Breivick. Even I remember Dr. Welsing and I, we read his manifesto and talked about, we have a whole program. You can go back and look, summer of 2011. Dr. Welsing was here. We were talking about Anders Breivick with Dr. Welsing. Global system. Can't believe. And we'll take a quick break, get ready to wrap things up so we can go about the rest of our, Monday? See if folks have a quick thought they need to get in. But, I didn't see unknown from, I would have got it. I didn't see it. Sorry, unknown from unknown galaxy. We'll take a quick break. And if I had seen your hand, I would have got you and see, because we did 3 hours. It wasn't hand taking time. We did 3 hours. Anyway, I'll take a quick commercial break, and then we'll get unknown from unknown galaxy and call it a broadcast. But again, priorities. Gus T was not out in the streets. In fact, I could have even just been here, had the Mad Dog 2020, and been cutting a fool. We didn't want it. Get ready. They already got the map out for the parade. See, I could have been ready to act a fool later this week, too. Reading about Anders Breivick. And then, because I was sober, I did remember Jonestown and the Lebensborn. Oh, my God. That is why. Was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? That is why. That book is in the top 5. Maybe should even be higher, but minimum top 5. The Lebensborn, we talked about that right there. Eugenics. I just neglected. Norway was one of the central kind of, like I said, they have whole books, they have documentaries. If you want to, and Dr. Welsing, I wish I had known that when she was still with us, because I would have asked her about that. Did you know about this Lebensborn project? Blah, blah, blah. Did you hear about that when you went to Germany? They have whole books, and when I say books, there are books that are still being published. This is like something that many white people, it is fascinating. You make a whole program, you go and take over people and then say we're going to get the women, get the best of the women so-called, and put them with the best of our white soldiers and make these super white babies. What? Lebensborn. Where you get that from? Learning about was Jones, and you see the symmetry. They put that up. Oh, experiment, right? We're gonna do this and make these old super babies. You get them down in Jonestown and say it's an agricultural and medical project, and we give them medications and pills and all this old behavior. Anyway, reading more important than watching television. We did talk about Lebensborn when we read that their book. Thankfully, I still got a little bit of my brain computer. We will be right back after a quick pause. Let's see.
Got another term on there, VGQ. What does that mean? Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Now, that keeps you from getting into arguments with other black people, particularly on television, which I get sick of that. Black people shouting. We get into our ghetto thing once we get on television and get wound up. And we start all yelling at once. And the racists sit there smugly and just look. They watch the tennis match, so to speak. Right? And black people are shouting each other down, talking about, you don't know what you're talking about, and so and so and so and so, and we go into our Amos and Andy Sapphire Act. Okay? VGQ means Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Guaranteed qualification to do what? To give your opinion on anything about race. Don't care what it is. If you're on there with Minister Farrakhan or You on there with Mike Tyson? Or are you on there with Miss, what's her name, Williams? The lady that had him put in, recommended that he be put in jail. Or are you on there with anybody? So you don't cut the other black person down. Now, I don't even like that term brother and sister, even though it's been around for about 30 years. Well, I ain't going to talk about the brother here, no. See, we haven't reached that stage where we can do that. See, we got to crawl before we walk, but we don't miss any steps. Don't say you are what you're not. Don't say you feel something that you don't really feel. You don't really feel that he's a brother. I usually use the expression, I don't like anybody in here. I say that to all audiences. I haven't been taught to like anybody. I've been taught to dislike people. Been taught that. And then they taught to dislike me, so it's just compounded disliking. They haven't even got to love yet. All right? So what we do is minimize conflict, try not to hurt each other. So a certain thing, that's what a code is for. It's a stopgap. It keeps me from saying something against you. You say, well, don't you agree with what this person just said down here on the other end and whatnot? That person has VGQ, Mr. Donahue. I keep using him because he's one of the most prominent TV people. Right? But the main thing you do is try to stay off of a radio program or TV program or even a neighborhood stage program, you might say, where you spend your time shouting back and forth at other black people. Nothing is getting done there. And when it's done on television, a lot of black people just get up from the TV set and go on in the kitchen somewhere. Once that shouting starts. Yeah, they get disgusted. They say, oh, here we go. They started off okay, but now they're doing a job on each other, and I don't even want to hear it. So just don't do it. And you cut it off. The cutoff point is that person has victims guaranteed qualification. You spell it out what it means. Meaning the person can say anything about race that they want to, and I can say anything about it that I want to. You are guaranteed that. You earn that as a victim. Simply by being a victim. Now, if a white person says something, that's something else.
Darn tootin'. Unknown from Unknown Galaxy. Star 61 if you want to get a quick comment in before we wrap. We did go a little over our normal time, but hopefully worthy of folks' time and energy. I know I learned quite a bit. We got books, got to emphasize the importance of reading, even when talking to people from other parts of the world. Come back to some of the same core concepts and the importance of words. Can't stress that enough. And I would even say not getting into conflict with other victims of white supremacy. I was thinking that this was a white person. As I said, originally it's mostly white people in Norway. So I was ready. Let's get in and, talk about what have you. A white person saying, invisible, I would respond a little differently. But once I grasped this as a non-white person, after I got over my being bummed about not being able to talk to a suspected racist in Norway, I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll just, change my approach and questioning, that sort of thing. I had to immediately move down, asking about definition of racism and make some other adjustments, and then just remembering, no conflict, trying to learn about a way different part of the world, and I learned quite a bit. But within that, I did note, and just because we've had a lot of guests on in short succession, and even missed one yesterday, so it's supposed to be even more, but just paying what I've said for years. I look at the references, people that they cite in their book, and frequently it'll be the same names. Dr. Pat. And some of the time, hey, I'm thankful that we have been on our assignment here at the Cows, and a lot of these folks we have talked to. Noel Ignatiev in the archives, 2009. Peggy McIntosh in the archives, 2009. Joe Feagin in the archives, 2010. Charles W. Mills in the archives, 2009. It was quite a few. Linda Alcoff. It was quite a few authors. She was more recent, like 2023, thereabouts. But it's the same people that are mentioned, Frederick Douglass, James Baldwin, Frantz Fanon, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Kimberly Crenshaw, it's the same collection of authors that are mentioned to articulate white supremacy racism, and most of the time inaccurately. That's how you end up with Invisible and things of that nature, not Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who he said, oh man, I'd been watching names, I didn't know she had this book, blah, blah, blah. But it will not be Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. It will not be Neely Fuller Jr. It will not be The Delectable Negro. The Man Not, Race, Class, Genre, and the Dilemmas of Black Manhood. These sorts of texts that give a very different perspective about what it means to be classified as white, and the violence that happens, and what it means to be the violence that happens within this system. It's not privilege. It's not that we're invisible. This is a deliberate response to white genetic annihilation. This is to be expected in all areas of people activity in a system dominated by white supremacy racism. That is a very different way of talking about and thinking about this problem. But I do appreciate, because that is so, and I just want to point that out, we've been here for like 17 years. 17 years this month. We've had a book club here for 12 years at this juncture, or it might even be, make sure I got my time, do those early more, 14, Jiminy. The book club has been here for 14 years. 2012, had to get my math correct. He is like one of the few people who has ever said, hey, you got a book list? I've had a few listeners here and there who've asked for the top 10 list specifically, but it is very rare that I have, people say, hey, do you have books that you would say recommend? And normally I just say, Lee do have a book club. You should listen to the book club. Black-owned, we're reading that right now. Black-owned, like poorly attended. It has been for the duration of the 14 years. But generally, people are not very receptive to books on racism. That's generally been my experience. And I would even submit Neely Fuller and Dr. Welsing. It's tons of non-white people that I'm aware of where they will say, yes, I'm a big advocate of Mr. Fuller and Dr. Welsing, but I didn't read their books. Even people who have their books. I am aware that a lot of people have said they had difficulty getting their books and they can't go to a bookstore and get it in their area, or maybe they don't even live in the U.S. and so they have a hard time. But it's a lot of non-white people I'm aware of. They have the book, they've owned the book for a long time, have never read it, or have never read the entire thing. And then, that just goes for lots of others. Reading is not our culture. White people are most to blame, but reading is not our culture. Anyway, but man, eager to get a few books and let's do some learning. And he's an educator. Those theories can be applied, shared with other educators, shared with other non-white people who are interested in learning for themselves or teaching other non-white people around the world. Maybe never heard of Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller. I think he's probably maybe got a little less attention because Dr. Welsing was on TV a little bit. I don't think Mr. Fuller was, but to be exposed to that material, man, bravo. Glad we were able to do it. And like I said, I learned quite a bit. Anders Breivick and the whole Greenland and mobilization if white people get upset about what Trump is doing. Like, wow, learned quite a bit. Remember, we have a whole program in the archives. I've forgotten about Zwarte Piet. I forgot we did have people on from the Netherlands, not Norway, to talk about Zwarte Piet and those campaigns that he talked about where sometimes it gets violent. And white people said, we got to have Zwarte Piet. I thought it was important that when he talks about that in his book, Black Pete, he talks about the children recognize that Zwarte Piet is Santa Claus's helper or even slave. That right there, white people are not ignorant about racism. They grasp 5, 4, 6, 7. Black slave, we got it. Pete, slave, we got it. We got it. We got it. White people are not ignorant. And that's the same thing. That's not invisible. We see you. The dark one, that's the slave. That's not invisible. We see it. Santa Claus, that's the good one. Benevolent. They say, and even Santa Claus can't be Negro. Negras is broke. Where you get gifts from? You done robbed somebody? You done some looting? I'm going to remember that one when we get to December. That's it. I think we might have lost Unknown from Unknown Galaxy. My fault. Oh, no, we didn't. Unknown from Unknown Galaxy. Did you have commentary? I would have went quicker. His hand disappeared. Did you have commentary to share, sir?
Hello, Mr. Renegade.
Greetings.
Mr. Renegade, yes, I did have things to ask that guy. Because when I was listening to him, he sounded so childlike in his knowledge of racism. So I came up with a concept. I said that I'm an expert at racism, and you got professors and you got I don't know, educators. But I was going to say, Mr. Renegade, he's the god of racism, and he knows everything. And you should get your information from him by listening to the C.O.W.S and the backlog, your archives, because obviously within there is a vast amount of knowledge that he needs. But at the same time, you got other sayings, you don't know what you know until you know it, or don't give people a hard time what they don't know, because there was a time when you didn't know what you know. I think I got that from Mr. Scotty Reed, the great journalist, Mr. Scotty Reed. And he was very interested in his views about racism in his country. He said he's been to London. I wanted to ask him what he thought the difference was between the two countries in racism. But on the whole, Mr. Renegade, I felt sorry for him because he was very childlike in his understanding of racism, and he's got a lot to learn. But, he knows a lot that I don't know, and I know what he doesn't know, and you know what I don't know, and I know what you don't know, and it goes around. But he's got a very nice and interesting journey ahead of him, and you will be in Norway in front of
Did we get disconnected? Was that me, maybe?
No,
okay,
no, Mr. Renegade, it's my phone keeps blacking out. I don't know how to disconnect the auto sleep. But Mr. Renegade, that's about it, really. He was a good guest. His views are naive, but he excels in other parts because he's travelled quite widely. But he hasn't experienced racism in the way that you have, or maybe I have. He's got a lot to learn. He doesn't understand. I do with the psychology of the racism, and if you don't understand that, you're just blind. You're just walking into traps every day because you can't see it coming. And I had a little concept of before the punch, you have a thought. Yeah, so that's what I work on, the thought. Because that can help you avoid the punch if you know it's coming. So a lot of the times he said, I was shocked, I was surprised, we didn't know, but a lot of what he said was stuff that happens to us every day in our countries. Mr. Renegade, I could go on. It's good to hear you again. Keep up the good work, and hello, and all your listeners, welcome. I miss you all, Mr. Firefighter, and everybody else. And I hope I made myself clear.
Much obliged. As you said, we're all still learning, so haven't quite got this problem solved yet, unfortunately. I did appreciate, he did seem very humble to the fact that he is still learning. I think he said that
yes.
was why he requested the list and such. So, yeah.
I acknowledge that as well. He was very humble. That's one thing I wanted to say to him, that yes, you are humble. So he knows he's got a lot to learn. I'm sorry to interrupt.
All of us got a lot to learn. So yeah, that was something I definitely appreciated. But yeah, and I mean that I thought I read that in the book, and then I got upset with myself because I might not have highlighted it, or just lost my place, or maybe I brushed the page away accidentally. But either way, I thought I read that he had a white partner, and then it came up organically in the course of the discussion. Certainly having offspring with a white person, I think that would have a immense impact on how you view what it means to be classified as white. I mean, they got children. I mean, hey, that whole episode about the race soldier from Louisiana who came all the way out, I guess, and was disappointed because he was thinking, I'm going to get some of the best and get some of these Nordic whites in my congregation, and it'll be a whole congregation of blonde, blue-eyed white people. And then we got all these dark immigrant. Wait a minute. Like that, I didn't come all the way across the world for that. Man, can we get some white people? That's what you got. He said, you just gotta make do, man. Sorry about all that. Like, and then this fella to come and tell him, oh man, you gonna have children. They gonna be off color. I don't even. That's the sort of thing. If I'd had time, I'd have went to look like, is that in the word, God? Off color? What does that even mean? Am I off color? What in the world? Like, man, can you pick out all the people in the church that are off color? In fact, where is that in the Bible? Does Jesus talk about, you got to be careful about being off color now? Where is that at? Come on, man. The religion of white supremacy. He doesn't use that language, but he does talk about that in the book. Yeah, I learned quite a bit. That was fascinating. That's why I said I learned quite a bit. I haven't had to put an asterisk down right there. That sort of thing has a massive impact on our understanding of racism. But I do appreciate he even did say, with white people, get down to business. Very important. That's what we need. Get down to business. Why is it that you are addicted to Black Pete? You're married to a black female, but you got to have Black Pete. Your black wife says she's upset about Black Pete, but you got to have Black Pete. What's going on here? Are you racist? That might be the only. Are you racist?
Another quick point, Mr. Renegade, if I can be allowed. Did you notice he referred to his partner, his baby mother, as his ex? I wanted to say that the relationships, they never work out between black and white. And I think that the white ladies, they just use the men to get the baby, and then they do the off. They make a quick escape with the child, and then they envelop the child into their culture. I just leave it at that.
President Obama is rolling over in his grave. Anyway, that is a joke. Not wishing death on the president. I do that joke all the time, joke about people who are still alive and say that. So not wishing death on the president, nor calling him an ape or anyone in his family. That's it. There is a whole book written about that, France Wendance Twine. Incidentally, or coincidentally, she wrote this book from the European perspective, although she is a non-white female here in the U.S., but she went all the way to Europe and interviewed all of these British white women who had a child with a black male and examined racism, what happened with the arrangements and all of that. And she came to the same conclusion that you did, that, or she didn't say that they used them, but that they do not work out. And the white woman ends up with a child and all the rest of it. And nothing that could be described as counter-racism effort with all of these tragic arrangements. Not even close. Just like we heard from Norway today and Black Pete. I thought that was so tacky and trite. Like, my wife is upset about this, even just for pleasure in the household. We do something else. We go see Santa Claus. We don't have to do the Black Pete. I don't know. We need the Black Pete thing. We got to have, come on, man. We just talked about the minstrel shows. We just talked about the minstrel shows. That's blackface right there. And that's an excuse like 20230, or excuse me, 2030. We got to blacken up. We're not being racist. We just black people. We always do black people. What do you mean racist? Anyway, at minimum, we'll be here Thursday, neutralizing workplace with, man, parade is Wednesday. Woo! Debauchery in the streets of Seattle. Probably bullets flying, too. Have to see if I'm going to go or not. But if I can survive all that, Thursday, neutralizing workplace racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and then we will wrap it up. I think I have to put black-owned on the list because, man, like, white people do not want us to read about racism. Like, dang. Like, I think I'm going to have to put black-owned on the list. But we will wrap it up Friday. Shar Adams, black-owned, the revolutionary life of the black bookstore, which omitted Dr. Welsing and Mr. Fuller. That is like a massive error, not just an omission. Massive error. Anyway, we will wrap things up. Much obliged for everyone tuning in. Unknown from the unknown galaxy. Much obliged. Our other callers who chimed in, hope it was worthy of your, I don't know, Monday, wherever you're tuning in from, Monday evening, or I guess, dang, for some folks it might be encroaching on Tuesday morning, Monday evening, Monday afternoon, wherever. For me, this started, it was Monday morning. I hate having those programs all early and what have you, especially after we won the Super Bowl, and it could have been Jubilee all night. But anyway, we will get to it. Priorities, if anything, priorities, man, priorities. You go. I'll see if I can go back and post the archive of the broadcast we did with Dr. Welsing, where we discussed Anders Breivick and the Norway terrorist attacks. You can hear what Dr. Welsing had to say about all of this, but we have a long record of discussing this problem global, known universe, not just the U.S. I just said Wednesday, we were talking about the missing boys of Ontario, Canada. Global system, nowhere to run if you are Negro. That's it. We did extra overtime. Wrapping it up. Since Anders Breivick, he did kill children, and I guess even traumatically shared that they thought their daughter might have been a victim of all of that carnage. Can you imagine? White people do not care about children. I was reminded of that repeatedly while reading his book, Too Black to Be Here. Even he starts it off with the murder of 16-year-old Benjamin Hermansen, who was a privileged black male killed in 2001 in Norway by some racist white hooligans. Reminded me of Stephen Lawrence in the UK. But either way, we will do it up. If Gus T ends up going to Norway based on this program, because I do have my passport, reading is more important than watching television and not getting drunk after your team wins the Super Bowl. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. Even if you triumph in the Super Bowl, that is no excuse for drunken shenanigans. Creator, we ask for today's broadcast, remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. Remind us to stop name-calling people classified as black. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Dr. Welsing say reading is more important than watching television. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.